properly.
We're talking about what it means to be a woman, though.
I was talking about what biological sex is a moment ago.
Why? I don't understand why Vosh never asked him. Is this really the best all? Why doesn't Vosh ever ask him, what do you think? By your definition, literally every single cemetery is a mass grave. Oh, did you go to the mass grave yesterday and visit Grandpa? Like, yeah. What?
Let's let him finish.
We've denied mass graves exist, even though the definition of mass is big. So at this point,
Connor, shut the fuck up.
Lord, please, for the love of God. Taylor Twin Rabbits, I'm pretty sure your brain is running on 1995, okay?
Never mind. Connor, you're clear for takeoff.
We're fucking 30 minutes into this goddamn debate talking about, like, I don't know, terms about murder and descriptive reality and history and all that kind of, and you want to talk to Lauren about fucking GPR and whether or not she can offhand can come up with a new way to conduct anthropology? I don't give a shit. Fucking catch up. Because basically what you're doing right now is you're acting smarter than everybody else in the fucking room while saying absolutely fucking nothing.
Absolutely fucking true. Okay.
Hey, let's have fun, okay?
Was it fun?
Was it fun? It was a conversation that occurred on my channel at one point.
Did you were just moderating this, right?
Yeah, moderated.
Did it get nasty? Or was it pretty cordial?
A few times. It was mostly cordial. I made sure there wasn't a lot of interruptions, but at the end is what everybody's talking about, of course.
Okay, yeah. Lauren told me that Lance went off at the end. His final closing, final statement, so I look forward to getting him. Good luck.
I just left. I left when that started. I was like, I'm gonna get out of here. Good luck with this guy. See you later.
Totally not related to this. This is something that I've thought about before, but I feel like I'm like 50-50. I could go either way. When I put myself out here and I have to have conversations, I'm not like Batman, but there is a risk to what I do, right? People know who I am. Theoretically, they can find me. I've done in the past. I do get annoyed sometimes. I feel the same with that Neo guy that not to do from the Wizard of the Book show. I feel it with him too. I don't like it when my face and my name are out there, and I'm debating somebody that won't even like turn the camera. That really bothers me. But maybe that's like an irrational point of view. Maybe there are reasons why some people should, some people shouldn't. I don't know. Just, it feels uneven. It feels like I'm arguing against an anonymous Twitter poster. There's no accountability ultimately for what they'll say. But
Great, wonderful. Now we're going to go into prepared statements. Now let me clarify for the audience what we're going to be talking about today, so there's no confusion. The topics that were given to me was that the debate will be primarily about retributive and vigilante justice for historical wrongs, and there might be some secondary discussions, if time permits it, about the recent burning Catholic churches in Canada, the recent discovery of the unmarked indigenous graves in the same nation, and the actions of Canadian government past as well as historical genocide. Do we all agree on the discuss topics? That no confusion? Yes. Wonderful. Okay, we will start with counterpoints with a prepared 2-minute statement. You will be timed, and I will give you a warning once you have about 20 seconds left.
okay, I understand that maybe this is my fucking ADHD or whatever. I was saying statements for like 20 seconds. Yo, I think retributive justice is wrong. There is no justification for it. We follow through. Then society descends to chaos, and everybody getting revenge for things they think they ought to get revenge for. Boom, what are your counter? And then I just like 2 minutes is like, in 1872, Canada signed the first treaties on retributive justice. Like, dude, this is just me. Sorry.
Yeah, so in preparation for this debate, I think the primary thing that I landed on was the fact that burning churches is just unacceptable. I understand that there's contentious history in Canada, but there's no real excuse for throwing a Molotov cocktail inside of a building. You have descriptive reasons, much like riots. You can understand why something is going on, but you probably can't morally justify it. So that's the number one contention that I would have. Number two, when it comes to Indigenous history, I think that the audience will probably be surprised, or hopefully they're not surprised, that there is a lot of concession for the sins of the past and all that kind of stuff. We can get into that. I'm interested to talk about definitions because obviously the word genocide is being brought into this conversation, so I want to talk about that as an aspect of this. And then ultimately, I think this conversation is indicative of where we are at as a continent as a whole. Europeans conquered this continent, colonized this continent, and did some nefarious stuff in order to do that. We have done sins in the past. Now we have to reckon with those sins and move forward as a society. So I'm hoping that we can kind of, even if it's very uncomfortable, even if it's contentious, I'm hoping that maybe we can do that here a little bit. And I'll leave it there.
48 seconds to spare. Now we're going to go over to
succinct, powerful.
Hey, okay, so I've written a little something, haven't written anything else for the debate, but today we have framed this debate as a discussion, obviously, around retributive and vigilante justice, and whether or not Canada is guilty of genocide. But what we are debating in reality here is acts of political terrorism, the committing of hate crimes, the burning down of religious sites, including the recent burning down of refugee churches, and those who are hell-bent on making excuses for this behavior, all based on the recent discovery of mass graves of Indigenous children, which activists have portrayed as evidence of genocidal actions by the Canadian government, which were covered up. The only problem with this entire debate is, firstly, even if this happened and the Canadian government committed genocide, there would be no excuse to commit hate crimes today, especially against people who had no connection to said actions. And an equally important and shocking revelation should be is that no mass graves were found in the first place. This is an entirely false narrative. No one here today is going to deny historical injustices happened. No one is going to deny there were deliberately children taken from their homes and educated to no longer have their culture and language, and that's horrific. I don't think that should happen to anybody. However, distorting the past, exaggerating atrocities, inventing the existence of mass graves to make it appear as though Canada committed and covered up some sort of Holocaust is a horrific mishandling of the truth, and it does nothing to help us uncover and heal from genuine wrongdoings which occurred. And in fact, it has caused more trauma today for Canadians and Indigenous communities who are now seeing their communities destroyed, their churches burnt to the ground, and relations ripped apart even further.
I'll give like rhetorical advice and then like factual advice. So I've talked with her quite a bit. I think that when she says there have been no mass graves found, you need to qualify what you mean by mass graves, because there have obviously been mass graves found. But I think that what you're probably talking about are like mass, like hidden graves or mass intentionally created graves of like genocide children. I don't think you can just open with there were no mass graves found, because clearly there have probably been large grave sites found. You need to define that mass graves in your position, or unless that's where I guess we'll find out. That's what she's gonna argue. It seems to be way more radical than what I would imagine it would be. But we'll see.
Hey everybody, so I'm going to say right out of the gates that neither me or my partner support or condone the burning of any religious institutions. What we're here today to talk about is obviously restorative and retributive justice in relation to the residential school system in Canada and the involvement of the Catholic Church therein. I'm going to try and say this as quickly and concisely as I can. The original founding father of this country, Sir John A. Macdonald, was a white nationalist, and I don't mean that in the sense that lefties like to call every single person they don't like a Nazi. He was a person who believed in the superiority of the Aryan race. He said it frequently. He, in Parliament, would say things that were considered to be outlandish and racist by the sign of the times.
Hold on, I'm actually super curious. I truly don't know this. When was the term Aryan? When was that invented? And when was Canada founded? Were they really using that phrase back then? Aryan? It might be. I don't know how dated that phrase is. I'm curious about that. In Europe, the notion of white spirit emerged in the 1850s. Probably okay. All right, awesome. All right. I wasn't sure if Aryan was like that concept emerged around like in the 1900s or if it was part of that.
And he started both the Indian Act in Canada and the reservation school system in Canada. He also instigated the reserve system.
One thing that I will say that I don't like argumentatively, I guess rhetorically it works, but I think you have to be very, very, very careful when you try to say the person who founded this therefore taints all of this. Because if you start getting into stuff like that, like you can tear down so many things that are probably good very quickly. The obvious and most common example of this is when oh god, what's not Margaret Thatcher? What's the name of the woman that conservatives always attack over abortion? Mighty Margaret Sanger, where, because I think, I hate to repeat, this might not be true or whatever, conservatives will point to her like, oh, this woman supported abortion, she was super racist, therefore if you support abortion, you're actually like, you're racist, and you're like genociding black babies. I don't like that the founder did something, therefore everything past that is tainted. Personally, like, I don't think that should be relevant at all. Like, I really don't give a fuck if somebody founded something that was or wasn't racist. I'm more curious if the way that thing works in writing, is it racist, and in effect, is it racist? Because there are racist people that can make stuff that, you know, like outwardly doesn't really have any bad racist shit, and there are non-racist people that can create systems that actually can have like some kind of down the road like racist impact. So I personally, from a logic bro point of view, I just don't like that argument style. But
in Canada. Now, for anyone who's unaware, the Indian reservation school system, what it essentially did was took 150,000 children away from their parents' arms and forcibly put them in institutions where they were systematically beaten, tortured, raped. They had their culture removed from them, their language, every aspect of them was destroyed. Those who tried to escape would often die in cold or drown in the water. So it was a horrifying experience by all accounts. Now, the Catholic Church themselves have never formally apologized for this, and neither have they been held to account for the thousands upon thousands of priests and nuns who again tortured and raped children. So I believe if we're going to be talking about restorative justice, the first place to begin would be that they have to both be held accountable for the crimes that they've committed, as well as the fact that they have to, in some form or another, pay retribution to those in which they've harmed. Thanks.
Now I'm going to throw it over to Tale of Two Rabbits.
I would first like to thank Lance for asking me to join him today, and Dylan's Luscious Locks for moderating. I open, as I so often do, with a story. In 1601, Juan Leonate visited a gigantic agricultural and industrial center of more than 20,000 people in what is now central Kansas. Because he was a conquistador, he then kidnapped and tortured 4 children to identify the houses of the town's leaders, and immediately afterward he waged a war to destroy the city with an army of nearly 1,000 soldiers. It was a mass slaughter. For the next 500 years, the school-taught history of the United States was the tribes of the plains were barely organized, semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers who knew only territorial wars and primitivism. And then, in 2016, using records, archaeological fieldwork, and remote sensing technology, Etzanoa once again became a fact. The stories natives had been telling for generations were finally again acknowledged as fact. As has happened many times in recent years, the U.S. was forced to again confront the cruelty and lies that had been perpetrated against the indigenous peoples right up to this very day. In May of 2021, using records, archaeological fieldwork, and remote sensing technology, the stories of the residential schools recorded by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report and told by natives for generations were finally again acknowledged as fact. Canada is presented with 2 possibilities when such simple and straightforward modifications to the histories of the world caused children are uncovered. We can, as in the case of Etzanoa, accept the correction, accept the native stories which roll along, and move forward with the knowledge that wrongs were committed that must be reckoned with. Or we can choose, as Lauren apparently has, what has brought us here today, refuse the most basic and straightforward facts in favor of denial, deflection, and dismissal. I come here as witness to those facts, as one small voice in a chorus to those stories.
it is, so something to keep in mind, so there's a whole meta supertext, there's a whole meta layer over this, in that, so Lauren Southern is essentially like the queen Nazi, right? So this is probably going to inform every member here in terms of how they approach this debate. But if we do just go by like just the word stated, Lauren did concede that there were wrongs committed that need to be looked at. But the pushback I think had to do with the mass graves, and I don't remember if the genocide or not. Although to the audience, it's probably not going to sound like that. I would imagine that anytime Lauren like tries to retreat from any accusation of wrongdoing, it's going to sound like she's running from all of it because of the kind of like the meta layer over this conversation.
I come here to discuss justice for those wrongs and the restoration.
This guy talking right now is trying way too hard to sound like the CGP great guy. Holy shit.
Dignity for those who suffer while waste.
So I just want to re-establish the rules one last time. If it gets out of control, I will assert myself and shut down the conversation. If you believe it's unfair, I'm sorry to say that I don't care. I will do my best to restore. I'm a law and order moderator. Law and order. Other than that, I think everybody else knows, though, in terms of service violations of any sort, we are now going to have an open format. It is now open for dialogue.
Well, considering that I've just been accused of denying basic facts, I would really like a tale of twin rabbit to describe which basic facts I've denied.
Okay, strong. So we have a pointed question. What facts have been denied? All right, in the opening statement.
You said that these deaths didn't occur and that these bodies weren't found.
That's not what I said, is it? I said there were no mass graves found.
What is mass graves, though?
I would be curious to know what your evidence is for that claim.
Firstly, I would like to ask both you and Lance to describe which mass graves have been found in Canada, and then I can respond to that.
So the factual basis behind this, and this is kind of where I'm in my research. So I don't know how Lauren is using mass graves, but the problem is, and I've looked for this, it feels like the overall claim is that children were killed or genocided, and then they tried to bury them in residential schools to hide the bodies. That seems to be the overall. I can't find a single example of that, and that feels like what kicked off everything relating to like this whole recent like reconciliation council, the whole genociding thing. Like I haven't found a single shred of evidence for that. The only thing I could find when I looked it up was there was a National Post story, which is right-leaning in Canada, but there's a National Post story, and they claim that the chief had said, they haven't quoted, saying, well, actually, we knew about that gravesite, we just kind of like it wasn't upkept, and we like lost track of it. Like I mean, it's not like it was just not maintained, right? Which is a far cry from the original claim. But
do you like to be more specific, as in the one that
well,
was?
You're saying I'm lying by saying no mass graves have been found. So tell me, where have the mass graves been found?
Well, the story that kicked it off was the Kamloops residential school. Mass graves were identified using ground-penetrating radar.
Between May 21st and 24th, 7,000 square meters of land, just under 2 acres, was covered in the location of the apple orchard at the Schwetmik Museum and Heritage Park. This area of interest was chosen for the survey based on a number of factors. First, the Knowledge Keepers' oral histories that recall children as young as 6 years old being woken in the night to dig holes for burials in the apple orchard. Second, a juvenile rib bone that surfaced in the same area. Third, a juvenile tooth that was excavated from a shovel test pit during an impact assessment conducted by Simon Fraser University's archaeology department. A juvenile tooth is not an indicator of loss of life, but given both discoveries, the possibility should not be discounted. As a preliminary assessment, this project sought to first, ascertain the likelihood of human burials within the study area. Second, begin a preliminary assessment of the possible locations of specific burials. And finally, develop steps to further this work in order to confirm the number and location of possible burials.
Right, and ground-penetrating radar cannot detect bodies.
I don't think this is the best argument to go for.
As an assertion?
Absolutely, you can go look this up. In fact, the woman who conducted the GPR herself actually went to my university. She said herself, we cannot confirm anything. This is simply an assumption based on, and I would encourage people watching to go and take a look at what images ground-penetrating radar show. They just show anomalies in the ground. They don't give you any context. They don't tell you if bodies are there. The anomalies could appear to be graves. Do they know if this grave site is just an overgrown graveyard? Do they know if it was the community graveyard? Do they know if there are any bodies in what these ground anomalies look like? No. And this is the facts of the case. The woman who did the ground penetration test in Kamloops, which sparked this all off, stated, we cannot know if there are any bodies under here until someone has dug this up and they've exhumed the bodies.
In GPR terminology, a subsurface anomaly refers to any irregularity noted below the surface, while a target of interest suggests that the anomaly has an increased index of suspicion for being the object of the search. As a preliminary assessment, the GPR was conducted in prospection mode. This means ranging across the study zone, following the guidance of the community members, capturing anomalies as screenshots in the digital video logger, and flagging anomaly locations on the ground for further investigation. A preliminary investigation such as this is not intended to provide exact numbers or final results, but rather to confirm the existence of burials. These results are as conclusive as GPR allows, but only forensic investigation with excavation will provide definitive results.
If they are there. And
My understanding is they were supposed to do this exhuming process, but now they said that it might take years. I don't know why that's the case, because maybe there's a good reason, but that seems kind of weird to me. Like, if it's a grave that was dug by humans, it's not like these guys are digging, like miles into the dirt, but maybe there's a reason why, but I don't think any bodies have been exhumed from any of these yet.
not only that, but the tribe leader there in Canada of the Kamloops band that brought out the initial statement about this said, even if there are bodies under the ground here, it's not a mass grave. And these are just preliminary findings, which has been the general consensus of all of these grave sites found, that they are not mass graves. And portraying it as such is deliberately misstating the truth and trying to make it seem as though Canada were committing some Holocaust and they were lining children up, shooting them, and throwing them in a grave that they dug. When we are talking about graveyards, if there are any bodies at all.
Okay, but you just said that the woman who did the GPR examination went to college with you. The director of the company that actually did it is a man named Julio. So who did you go to school with?
No, she's an instructor at the university I went to, and I mean, I can read the name here. So this is the girl who did the GPR technology test, which once again, GPR cannot pick up organic matter. Her name was Sarah Bellew. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm terrible with French names. So she conducted the search herself, and she stated nothing she has found can be confirmed unless excavations are done at the scene. These excavations have not happened.
I didn't hear you tell two rabbits.
So this is from Globe and Mail.
Give me a moment. I was trying to hear. Give me. Let me start when I'm talking. Nobody else is supposed to. I didn't hear what Tail Two Rabbits was saying earlier. Could you repeat what you were trying to say?
Well, at this point, I'm a little bit lost. She's friends with someone whose name she doesn't know how to pronounce, who isn't the director of the company who was hired to do the scanning. So at this point, I don't understand exactly what it is we're discussing. I thought we were here to discuss burning of churches and restorative justice. If you'd like to...
Oh my god. Oh, there are so many better counter-arguments to this. Ground penetrating scans do not 100% detect organic matter. That is absolutely true. But we can probably reasonably infer based on where things are.
The common features of a formal burial in a cemetery setting typically include a convex reflective pattern at the upper surface of the grave shaft, vertical refractive patterns at the sides of the grave shaft, a horizontal reflective pattern at the base of the grave, and also a range of possible reflective patterns for the contents of the grave. These features are not exclusive to burials. However, in areas where burials are expected, they can act as preliminary confirmation of the likelihood that burials exist and of their specific locations. I will reiterate that there was additional supporting evidence. The depressions in the orchard that correlate with the subsurface anomalies observed in the GPR data. There was an east-west configuration of the subsurface anomalies in the orchard that support typical Christian burial traditions. The juvenile rib bone and tooth discovered in the same survey location. And finally, but most importantly, the ceremonial knowledge keepers' oral histories that recall burials in this location.
That there probably be like bodies there.
In my experience, though, approaching a decade of work using GPR within a burial context, there are very likely to be many human burials in the study area. Further remote sensing such as GPR should be conducted to locate all possible burials. After all, this investigation has barely scratched the surface, covering just under 2 acres of the total 160-acre residential school site.
And maybe before we draw concrete conclusions about it, maybe it'd be best to wait for the exhuming of these bodies to begin, or this. To immediately like pile in on the ad homs, I think looks kind of bad. Although you have so much leeway here to shit on Lauren because her reputation is so bad that rhetorically it probably works. But it's very strange to me that this was, if any Canadians in chat, by the way, think I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. But my understanding is that this was the big event. This burial site was the one that kicked off everything. So you would think that you would come to this ready to discuss this particular burial site. You must be ready to discuss this particular burial site. What was the name? How do you spell the name of this particular burial site as well? I just want to do a quick Google search and see if I can find someone's name without like digging around like super hard. Implying they did research. Well, this guy's supposed to be like some super indigenous. Okay, Kamloops. This is just beginning. This guy's gonna trigger the fuck out of you. Sarah Boulier or Destiny. This is her name. Ground penetrating radar expert, Dr. Sarah Bellew. I don't know how the fuck to pronounce this shit. Recollections of children during 16 woke up in the middle of the night, digging holes of burials in the apple orchard, and human bones found in the same area among the facts of the area being chosen for a GPR survey. Led the search south of the school building, not far from the South Hudson River, finding signs of turner graves. With ground penetrating radar, we can never say definitively or definitely that they are human remains until you excavate, which is why we need to pull back a little bit and say they are probably burials. They are targets of interest. They have multiple signatures that present as burials, but because of that, we have to say that they're probable until one excavates. So it sounds like she is the lady that led this, and it sounds like this is more or less a statement. I would super expect that in this debate, this is you at the very least you're gonna know it's Bellew, whatever. That you would know this because it's a pretty important it's a pretty important thing to start with. But
challenge GPR and whether or not it's efficacious in the use of archaeological remains, I would point you to Etsanoa. Are you also challenging the identification of literally every site in the Americas that has...
Can I jump ahead?
Hey, I would like Tail Two Rabbits finish what you're trying to say. Can you finish that?
Because this is outside the scope of this conversation. I keep hearing affirmations of, oh, well, I know a person. I don't care.
Dude. This guy is the worst way than Lance. Hey. I think Lauren shouldn't have said anything about like, oh, she went to my school because again, she's toxic and everything that's associated with her will be toxic. But she didn't say like, oh, I got my friend to fucking look into this. And this is what she said. She's citing the person that led the search. Okay, like she is Canadian. It's not unreasonable. I think she lives in this area. I don't know if that's right. I don't know if she lives near the area. Like it's not unreasonable that she would know the person through a university. This is a crazy ad hom to start with. And to say I don't want to talk about this because you know a person. It's not just a random fucking person. Wait, what the fuck?
You know a person. I am talking about the company that did the work.
I'm talking about the woman who every Canadian article has stated did the search in Kamloops. And anyone can look this up. Go look up who did the GPR test in Kamloops. I'm reading the Globe and Mail right now. The title, Anthropologist Explains How She Concluded 200 Children Were Buried at Kamloops Residential School.
Okay, stop right there. Stop right there. How she concluded the 215 bodies were buried.
And once again, that's just media bullshit, because the article literally says she also stressed her findings cannot be confirmed unless excavations are done at the scene.
Can I jump ahead between the two of y'all?
Okay, 1 second. Lance was trying to say something before you, and so I want to make sure he got a chance.
No, I want to Tail to finish what he's saying. Don't go after counterpoints.
Okay, then we'll have Tail finish what he's saying, then we'll move over to counterpoints.
He doesn't want to finish. Oh no. Now his strategy is because it sounds like he doesn't actually, which is unbelievable to me. If he's literally like, hey, I'm indigenous, I play indigenous video games all day. That's how much I love it. That you wouldn't know anything about this. Like this was like day 1 of me reading about this, where I was like, hey, like what is a GPR? What is it? Like this is stuff you figure out immediately, right? Because if you want to be involved in the conversation, you have to do like a little itty bitty bit of preliminary reading, like what the fuck is this shit? How you know the thing that irritates me the most about this is like people will cry. People cry so much about me irresponsibly platforming alt writers. But when I have a debate with these guys, dude, I do a fuck ton of homework for this shit. I got fucking outlines. I like read all the fucking bullshit. I got like all my little fucking Google Docs and all this shit. And then these guys will come on and I don't even know like fucking ground zero, like anything about the initial story. How are you gonna cry about me irresponsibly platforming somebody? Like holy shit. Like at this point, the guy might as well ask her to like fucking queue up bot lane because Jesus Christ, what the fuck?
Okay. If she would like to challenge the findings of basic archaeology, then she's welcome to do so. But that's not why we're here, as I was led to believe.
You made this accusation against me. I responded, and I'm citing the individual who made these findings.
Oh god, can I bridge these two fucking perspectives, please?
No. This is why I hate duo debates. I hate duo debates. The reason why I hate duo debates is anytime you're approaching a kill shot down some argumentative ladder, your partner wants to jump in and pull it somewhere else. You don't need to pull it anywhere else. So from Lauren's perspective, she started with a claim. The other guy fired back and said your claim is bullshit. She challenged him on it. Now he's saying, well, I don't want to talk about that. And now Connor wants to derail to something else. I don't think you should pull it in any other place. I think the back and forth here is probably good for Lauren. If anybody should be trying to move the convo, Lance should be jumping in here, and Lance should be stating, okay, we don't care about like, okay, the initial burial site, like the details aren't really what we're here to discuss. We want to talk about like stuff related to the overall state of the residential schools and what should be done in response to these residential schools like existing. Lance should be the one trying to derail this kind of, not Connor, but.
Because otherwise we're gonna spend the whole time on fucking minutia.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, so
it's also not minutia too. Oh my god, he fucking totally destroyed her momentum. Oh no.
So let's go ahead and bridge these two perspectives for the love of God. The primary contention is not, GDR or whether or not kids died or anything like that. The whole reason is the use of definitions and words. Ultimately, I would like to avoid semantics, and instead of like fighting over semantics, I would like to talk about the concepts that we're trying to convey. The main objection that I think Lauren is poking to, that I would poke to as well, is basically the use of mass graves. When we use words like mass graves, basically what I conceptualize is people handed shovels, marched out into the woods, executed, and then thrown in shallow.
Okay. He is derailing her argument a little bit. This is a really good assertion, though. I wish he would have done it right at the start instead of derailing this line of argumentation. What are mass graves? Absolutely needs to be defined. I'm still not sure, because when you say mass graves, he's absolutely right. This is, and I criticized Lauren at the beginning. She should have an argument. Where are mass graves? Is it just a place where a lot of people were buried? Because that's not what people think when they hear mass graves. When people think mass graves, and you can say what you want, you're lying if you think otherwise. But the reality is that when people say mass graves, what they think of is you lined up a whole bunch of people, put them in front of a ditch, shot them, buried them, didn't tell anybody about it. That's what most people think of when you say mass graves. They don't just mean a fucking cemetery. This should have been explained at the very beginning of this debate, so they could be clear on what terms they were using.
Graves and then dirt loosely thrown over them. Okay, that's the primary contention here, is whether or not that's what's occurred. And based off of historical fact, which I'm sure Tale of Two Rabbits and the Surfs can assert, one way or the other, whether or not they agree with this, that's not what happened. They didn't march out 200 kids into the woods, execute them one at a time, throw them in a ditch, and throw dirt over them. And I have more points to this, but I just want to let's just bridge this gap on the definition of mass graves and keep it moving.
So, Lauren, you're already starting out with conspiracy theories. Whether or not you agree with the way the technology is being used, that's really not up for debate right now. Because at the end of the day, the people who have been accused right now of accomplishing these crimes, they in no short form have already, you've received a condolence from the Pope as an acknowledgement that something has happened here. There has been multiple instances, such as the Mohawk tribe, that have actually had to exhume bodies after ground penetration had been used. This is not something in which the ground penetrating radars have discovered these bodies and suddenly we don't have any idea about whether or not this is occurring. Also, the testimonies that have been given in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which are numerous, we're talking thousands and thousands of people, have attested to the treatment of the children.
So this is something that I talked about earlier. So this is just like also I don't understand Lance's point. So the Pope said something was wrong, but they also said the Catholic Church didn't recognize that this happened. He must know the Pope's part of the Catholic Church. I don't know. I don't know where he's going with this. I never know where the fuck Lance's brain's going with this. Something that's really important, and this is why I push so fucking hard against the cop videos and the BLM, like some of the examples that they choose or whatever. This is just a piece of like human life advice, especially important for things like relationships, and that could be romantic or sexual or friendships or whatever, any type or coworker relationships. If you open an argument with something that is not true, you could have 50 other true statements behind it, but your credibility is dashed when you open with something that's not true. This is why when people talk about like Breonna Taylor, I think that what happened, everything involved with Breonna Taylor was preventable, and some of the behavior, even assuming the worst case scenario, was absolutely unacceptable. That cop blind firing into the window, that's some shit that you read about in fucking video games. Absolutely unbelievable. But the problem is that when you open that conversation with the cop shot her when she was asleep in bed, well, if somebody figures out you're lying about that, what the fuck do they trust you about anything else you say? You cannot open with a lie. Even if you have a piece of information and you change your mind on it later. So for instance, in the opening part of the pandemic, the CDC didn't recommend wearing masks, and Fauci said that there was no reason to wear masks. Probably not the best statement to make. And conservatives have hung him on like that one statement. Now we got people like fucking Lawrence on that saying like, oh, I don't trust the CDC, I don't trust anything, blah blah blah. It's like, okay, calm the fuck on. Like because they changed their mind over the mask thing, now we're gonna listen to like Alex Jones on vaccines over anybody else, like anybody, right? So you cannot start off with bad information. As soon as you do that, and then somebody catches you on it, and you want to back off, like, okay, well, what about the thousands of other blah blah blah? Okay, thousands of other, then start with that. If you've got thousands of other people's worth of testimony, then start with that. Why would you start with a lie? In my brain, because I have a reptile brain just as much as the rest of you guys, when somebody starts a story off to me with a lie, I'm assuming you have nothing. Because the assumption that I make when I'm talking to somebody is that if you're going to argue a point, you're going to lead with your best foot. You're not going to start with some weak bullshit and try to surprise me at the end. You're going to start with your strongest argument, because as humans, that's what we do, right? Why do you think that I was doing this bad thing last night? Because I talked to fucking Jerry and he saw you there, right? You're not going to say like, well, I checked your gas tank this morning and I noticed it was a little bit lower than it should have been based on where you said you don't start with that shit. That no one does that. You're gonna lead with your strongest piece of evidence every single time. Okay. So don't fuck up.
These residential schools. Once again, that's not a matter of did they line them up against the walls and shoot every single one of them in the face? That is not exactly what happened here. Once they became wards of the state, as in once they became the property of the federal government or the provincial government, their treatment then became their responsibility. So whether they died from experimental starvation, which is something that happened, whether they died from high rates of tuberculosis, which is something that happened, whether they died from torture, rape, or abuse, which is something that happened, 1 in 5 children was sexually abused in these schools. That was sexual abuse that was happening while, again, they were children as wards of the state. So it doesn't matter how you want to try and skirt past whether or not these crimes have occurred.
Virtue signaling is a terrible argument. Yeah, Lance seems to lean on the heartstrings, which is not going to. I mean, like, it can be effective. I mean, like, leaning on heartstrings. I just think you have to lay like a very small factual foundation before you start leaning on it to do it.
Okay, I'd like to address that.
Sure.
So,
You want to get towards Lauren, but are you okay with counter-responding?
Yeah, he cares. Actually, Connor, can I just quickly make one clarification and then I'll jump to you? I never stated atrocities didn't happen at these schools. It was a very unfortunate thing in the 1800s and 1900s. Early.
She needs to not use the word unfortunate, because when you say unfortunate, you are taking so much away from ever like finding common. When you say unfortunate, you're like, oh shit, a ton of kids just happen to fucking die in these schools. That sucks. Like, damn dog, what are you gonna do? That word is a very, very, very bad word and can betray like a deeper, I would say, a misunderstanding of maybe how, I don't know if I say intentional, but how negligent some of these schools were. I think unfortunate is a very, very bad word to use here.
1900s, particularly in general, that there were horrific things going on at orphanages, boarding schools, residential schools, of course, there's proof of this. But you have asserted, and I don't want to see you walk back on this unless you're going to admit it, that these were mass graves. You have asserted that they are evidence of genocide, when the very chiefs of these tribes, who you're saying are talking about the lived experience in the area, have stated these are not mass graves. Some of these, if bodies are found, we don't know whose graves they even are. They could be a mix of settler children as well who died of tuberculosis, and there was a pandemic going on at this time that the residential schools were at their peak. These could be various reasons, but they were not mass graves, and that is what I'm calling you out on. That's what I'm calling out all these activists on that have made this claim. And dying of tuberculosis, dying of disease. Well, of course, we can talk about the horrific conditions. To say that people were intentionally trying to give children tuberculosis, I think is absurd. But I'll let Connor keep going.
Yeah, so I just want to jump ahead descriptively, because at the end of the day, like, this is what I guess frustrates me about this conversation. So we can describe wrongs and evils on a spectrum, and we can just acknowledge that they're evil and that they're wrong. So for instance, Lauren and I are both parents. If our children were taken from us, forcibly taught another language, wards of the state, and then by the way, like the demographics or the stats that I saw was literally like 70% tuberculosis, like 20% fire, and 10% death from exposure during attempted escape. So if my son was kidnapped from my home, forced to learn another language, given a different name, and then tried to escape back to me and died in the woods, I can't think of a more horrific thing to experience, except for my family being dragged out all at once and being executed. So on a spectrum, it's pretty much like the second worst thing that I can imagine. And I think that we can concede that while also basically trying to get into the historical detail. And by the way, like this isn't so much so whenever I'm trying to describe past historical wrongs or anything like that, I'm not trying to excuse it, okay? I'm trying to be descriptive about the historical past. And then what I would say, I'll just jump out on this limb, is that by definition, by the UN's own definition, kidnapping children and then basically trying to destroy in whole or in part a certain demographic group or whatever is the definition of genocide. The question is, when did this end? Whether or not this is comparable to other historical atrocities, which if you're on a spectrum, you can probably say, and then whether or not that justifies current vandalism and current attacks on Christian churches. That's kind of like the crux of it for me.
Okay, one moment. I was given a link by Lance that I put in the chat about tuberculosis, and I will also put it in the group chat as well for everybody else. Lauren responded to Lance, so I'm going to give Lance some time to respond.
Yeah, so first off, there's studies that come out now that say researchers say that tuberculosis in residential schools was no accident. So again, that was one of the many things that were done to these children, including the fact that these children were experimented on by giving them various different degrees of sustenance, in that they were given malnutrition.
Wait, is that true that a lot of children, like not just like 1 or 2%, but a lot of children were intentionally infected by... Okay, this is what he linked. I'm curious about this. Researchers say that TB at residential schools was no accident. Two experts in tuberculosis say the mass death in schools was no accident, but the result of deliberate neglect that was part of Canada's broader genocidal project. Lena Faust, a PhD student at McGill International TB Center in Montreal, and Courtney Heffernan, manager at the tuberculosis program evaluation research unit at the University of Technology, on July 12th, Globe and Mail op-ed that it's unknown how many children whose mates were recovered from America's past 2 months dies with TB. As early as 1907, Chief Medical Officer of the Department of Indian Affairs, Peter Henderson Bryce, identified schools as an ideal vector for TB transmission, going as far as to say it was almost as if the prime minister of the outbreak of epidemics had been deliberately created. Faust and Heffernan, who were advocates for ending TB in Canada, emphasized that although there was a TB epidemic at the time, it was greatly exacerbated by ignorance of residential schools. TB is a communicable, infectious disease directly shaped by inequity at the individual and population levels as well as social determinants of health, including malnutrition, overcrowding. Bryce found that TB deaths were higher in residential schools. So what I'm trying to find in here is when you rise to saying that some deaths were deliberate, I'm going to need evidence of something that couldn't be explained by like a systemic impoverishment condition, right? So here's an issue right now. These are some assumptions I'm working on. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure I'm right though. The indigenous schools were probably overcrowded. They were probably underfunded, and they probably weren't ran by people that were like at the top of their game. My guess is the best of the best probably weren't working at indigenous skills. So that's my guess. So what I'm going to need to see, and I'm hoping it's in circle, what is this evidence of that it was intentionally made so that children would die of tuberculosis? Because you're going to have to do better than there were poor conditions. Bryce found that the TB death rates were far higher in residential schools among children in the general Canadian population. In Southern Alberta alone, he found that 20% of residential children died with TB as the most common cause of death. When I see stats like this, so I'm guessing it's probably the highest in Southern Alberta. Is Southern Alberta the name of a province? I thought it was all just Alberta. Am I wrong? Is there like a Southern Alberta and a Northern Alberta? Stuff like this like sets my bullshit alarm off hardcore. Whenever I hear somebody's like, oh, like if somebody were to say to me, illegal immigrants commit so much crime in the United States. In the southeast quadrant of New Mexico alone, 42% of incarcerated prisoners are like, wait, why the fuck are you picking like that one area? Wait, what? This just seems like a weird, like in Southern Alberta alone, 20% of residential children. Like, why? It seems like a weird region to pick for. I don't know. Why not like all of Canada or why not like I don't know, but whatever. According to the Canadian Public Health Association, TB death rates in First Nations communities in the 30s and 40s were 700 per 100,000, so the highest ever recorded in the human population, but in residential schools they were astronomical, 8,000 per 100,000. As a result, Bryce recommended improvements to the school buildings and children's diets, as well as having TB nurses on staff. The federal government of the day not only ignored Bryce's advice, arguing that these changes were too costly, but prevented him from doing any further research into conditions in residential schools, presenting his findings at academic conferences. In his 1922 book outlining his findings, The Stories of National Crime, being an appeal for justice to the Indians of Canada, Bryce blasted the Fed, arguing this trail of disease and death has gone on almost unchecked by any serious efforts on the part of the Department of Indian Affairs. TB is still spreading in Canada with 1,796 cases for 2017, a disproportionate number of them infecting First Nations and Inuit communities. According to Faust and Heffernan, the amount of active TB cases is 400 times higher among Inuit peoples than the non-Indigenous populations. How many Inuit people are there? What is the Inuit population? 140,000. Okay. The staggering imbalance underlines continuing consequence of colonial structural violence and a failure to address the social determinants of TB, such as equitable access to healthcare and adequate housing. Genuine type regulation will not only recognize the truth of the suffering deliberately inflicted on Indigenous peoples by settlers, but also honoring Indigenous communities more. Okay, so this doesn't satisfy that claim at all. The idea that this was done like deliberately, it is absolutely. I doubt Lauren is probably familiar with this, or maybe Connor. I don't know if either of them will read this article, but yeah, this like everything in this article can just be explained by underfunding, neglect, and lack of care. Now you can argue that it was like grossly negligent, which is fine, or like crimes even for that. But did Lance read past the headline? No chance. No chance. Lance read this article. 0% chance. But
intentionally to see how children would react to different amounts of, say, milk and vitamins being given to them. The other thing to talk about when it comes to children in residential schools and their atrocious numbers is, again, the mortality rate was about 40 to 60% in these Indian residential schools. If they are, like we've all established, I think we all agree right now, that they were wards of the state, it doesn't matter what the cause of death was, even though the cause of death in many cases could be things like, again, physical or sexual torture, including traditional torture. There was an electrical chair in one of these schools. That being done, it doesn't matter if they died from starvation, it doesn't matter what. If you are taking
electrical chair in one of these schools, I hate these types of debates. I would lose my mind on this, but okay.
Children from their parents, you become responsible as their guardian for what happens to them. So all the deaths are responsible under the residential school system. And finally, my last point is going to be this. We cannot talk about this as if it's something that happened a long time ago and just a sordid part of our past. The last residential school in Canada closed in 1996.
This is a talking point that's brought up a lot. I'm pretty sure the vast majority of these schools were closed like in the early 1900s. Like, does anybody have a timeline for that? I tried to look, but there's like there was one that went into like 96 or whatever, but it's not like they closed like the last huge batch of them in 1996. I heard this talking point so many times.
Okay, if you want some context, last time Canada won the Stanley Cup was 1993. Fucking Nirvana was still playing. You know, like that's not generations ago.
Okay, I need to interject with one stat. There's one stat that I just need to clarify.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so Lance, you're saying that the mortality rate was 40 to 60%. You're talking about like individual schools, right? Not like the entirety of the program, right?
So according to the Dr. Bryce report, which was the medical inspector for the Department of Indian Affairs, he said the over sum total death was around 40 to 60% mortality rate for children in Indian residential schools.
Okay, then I want to address this head on, because basically the current historical estimate total for deaths is around 4,000. As we've already talked about previously in the debate, total participants are around 150,000. That puts the death rate at roughly 2.5%. So if you're talking about the roughly 40 to 60%, what I read was that there were some schools where there were fires. So as a result, like 70% or 60% of the student body died in that fire. I also read that there were tuberculosis outbreaks. So within that subset of a specific school, like let's say there were 30 kids, 60% of them died in a horrific way. And again, like whenever I'm being descriptive, I'm not trying to minimize this. Okay?
I wonder what was overall mortality in residential schools, Canada. I wonder if we can find that number. I wonder the actual answers. I haven't looked at this. Quick facts on residential schools. There was a 40 to 60% mortality rate in Indian residential schools. Does that mean in all of them? So we have a Dr. Bryce report in 1907. So this doesn't include anything past the 1900s? Isn't that kind of... Can we get this Dr. Bryce report? Sorry, give me a second. I'm curious about this. Dr. Peter Bryce, Indian schools deal out deaths. Sterling mortality shown. Report department. 25%. Dr. Bryce shows conditions of sexual disease. Report says that of the total 1,537 pupils reported upon, nearly 35% are dead. And in one school with absolute accuracy, the statement shows that 69% of the ex-pupils are dead. Everywhere, some severe cause of death is given as tuberculosis. So this report was published in 1907. I don't know if either Connor or Lauren will know this, but if that report was published in 1907, then it's a little bit silly to say that like 40% of all the kids died, because it's like, well, at that point they have, but if you're making the argument that these schools were running until like the 70s, I'm sorry, until 1996, then I mean, you're making it sound like 40% of children were dying literally up to 90s. That's I feel like, I don't know if this is like,
I'm not trying to minimize this, but I'm just trying to clarify that 150,000 students weren't taken into a boarding school and then 40 to 60% of them died. That's just not factually accurate.
I also have one thing I want to respond to Lance here, because this is really important.
So
And
allow Lance to respond to that first.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the same study counterpoints, it turns out that 90% of them suffered severe physical, emotional, or sexual abuse at the hands of the people who were guarding them. As a result of that, many of them also committed suicide. So it isn't simply a matter of them dying in fires, a matter of
not know the year of the report.
them dying by tuberculosis, a matter of them dying by starvation, which of course were all accountable reasons.
Did he say the 1907 report by Dr. Bryce, do you think?
If 90% of the children are suffering one of those conditions, I think you'd all agree that on some, like the sum total of this was an atrocity being committed.
I don't think he actually knows the year of the report. He said same report. Does he know it was in 1907, or does he think this was something like very, very recent?
Sure, and just because I was directed at me?
Yeah, but Lauren, what's next?
if you've got a quick point, yeah, go on.
Yeah, so fast. Again,
Well, sorry. Land cites the reconciliation, which is 2016, just record only around 4K deaths out of 150,000 participants. Sure, the theory says he specifically referenced this report by Dr. Bryce, which was in 1907, which I'm guessing, because I don't really know. I'm guessing there were probably way more motherfuckers dying of tuberculosis in those years than there probably were in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? Like, he's making it sound like of all 150,000 students, like 90% of them were either like killed or raped. Like, that's what he's making it sound like, right?
Ever I'm being descriptive, I'm not trying to minimize what the fuck happened. It was fucking awful. I'm just trying to be descriptive so we are accurate. Because if I heard that 150,000 of my countrymen were, or ethnicity or whatever, were put through a system and 60% of them died, then maybe I would be Molotov cocktailing some shit, right? That's why we need to be very specific about what happened historically.
Connor's got to focus on the numbers. Yep.
Okay. Also, Lance, people asking for the source on what you've provided. Could you send that over to me?
Yeah,
Like, over to Lauren.
Well, yeah, so this is something that really rubs me the wrong way. Whenever people talk about residential school programs and compare the residential schools that were open in the 1800s to the ones that existed in the 90s and were closed down. And if we talk about, for example, Lance talked about an electric chair existing and then said the last residential school that existed was shut down in 97.
Oh, so now she's talking about the linking the years. This is, I think, a really important part of their argument, because that is what Lance is trying to make sound like. The last school was closed in 96. They had goddamn electric chairs in these schools. So it's good to focus on the timeline here.
That school was called Cabalic Hall, and it was
96.
closed in 96. It was closed in the Northwest Territories. It was not set up as a residential school. In fact, it was a whole legal battle with the Canadian government to even get registered as a residential school, because what it actually was it was a hostel/boarding room that was set up for kids who did not have families that were near high schools because they were too rural. So the Northwest Territories government said, okay, we need to create boarding in the town, and then if kids are way far out in the middle of nowhere, we can give them the option to go to high school so they have somewhere to stay. An indigenous kid came out, stayed in this boarding area, and then later took the government to court to get reparations for residential schools, claiming that it was a residential school because he was removed from his family home by the government for the purpose of education, and that he started speaking his language, he started forgetting some of his language while he was going to an English-speaking school, and thus that was part of the destruction of his history. And to compare this to schools where there was abuse going on, where there was tuberculosis outbreaks, and where people were being forcibly removed from their homes, and comparing that to schools where it's like, hey, you know, kids that are in rural areas can't have a high school education, you have to pay the hospital for them.
One moment, wait.
That's absurd.
Oh, man,
you can read
cut it
this.
off.
Everyone watching this please.
Stream seems to have crashed.
I just want to say, if you have a team with Lance and like a fucking professional indigenous guy, and Lance is the one dealing with most of the arguments, you're so fucked. Where's the meme where it's like, dude, this is my debate partner, I'm gonna lose the debate? Like, Lance would be in every single one of those memes.
Yeah, I guess my first response would be that if your assertion is that nothing bad happened at that school and then therefore it doesn't matter, my statement as to which the last residential school closed in 1996, I think you're just resorting to pedantry. That doesn't change the fact that it was still considered a residential school.
Oh my god, you have to respond better to these. This is actually irresponsible fucking platforming. If Lauren Southern is a Nazi queen, you should at least read on like one or two of the fucking examples you bring up. Like, why would you do this? Like, even if you fucking hate the fuck out of her, she does like all the fucking documentary shit or whatever, right? You know that she's at least gonna know one or two of these talking points, right? She's fucking Canadian. Everybody's heard about these fucking talking points. Like, I'm not even Canadian, and I've heard the fucking like the last one was closed in 1996. Rapid train scanners found mass graves everywhere. Like, I know about this, and I'm not Canadian. And truthfully, I really, that's not like my purview to like research this shit. You want to know that the other person's gonna have some kind of prepared response to this. How can you not know this? How can you not know anything about this? And this is the second time that he's done this, where he's like, I don't want to talk about that. That's just pedantry. That's just blah 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 blah. And then I don't know if he's about to jump into it again, but then he always segues to the what about the other thousands of abuses and blah 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 blah. Well, fuck, we don't talk about that. Talk about that instead.
And I would also like you to provide evidence that nothing bad ever happened in that institution.
That's not how that works. I don't know how you can provide evidence that nothing bad happened. You're the one making the positive claim. You've asserted that something bad has happened. You can't say like, yo, that's cool. There's a lot of bad shit that happened. And someone says, really? I don't think so. It's like, well, really, we'll prove nothing bad happened. Wait, what? You're the one making the positive. You're the one that needs to provide the proof, motherfucker. What do you mean? I can prove that nothing happened. How do you even go about doing that? I need to find some report that studied a school to say that nothing happened at the school. Was there like a lawsuit about the conduct of the school? Was there a specific study on this specific school? Like, oh man, the fact that, and this is another thing. Remember, it's not always about what people say. It's about what people don't say. When he opens to something like that, I would actually blind fire back because I know if he's saying that, you don't know anything about what you're talking about, right? Because you're telling me to prove a negative. That means that you can't prove a positive, which means you're full of fucking shit, bro. And that, yeah, what an absurd statement.
So the fact it doesn't change the overarching problem that these residential schools are not a sorted part of our past.
And then we go back to the generalized problem. Oh my god, dude, this is like debate like 101, right? This is like the standard Gish gallop. You lay out 6 bad arguments, somebody pushes back on one, and then you talk about 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and then they're like, okay, well let's talk about 2, and then you're like, okay, well then talk about 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you're like, wait, hold on, I thought we did one. What about argument 3? And like, okay, what about 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6? Right? And you're like, what the fuck? Like, why do you keep restating arguments I've just proven? Holy shit.
We're going to eventually have to evolve into the child and foster care system because that was an evolution of the residential schools. And also talk about the fact that within the criminal justice system in Canada, almost 40% of all the indigenous inmates are survivors of the residential school system. So the trauma.
What is that? I mean, no offense, but we're all survivors of fucking high school. Like, wait, what does that statement even mean? Why do we keep? I like how we keep opening more and more and more like bags of worms, like when we cans of worms. Like we keep opening more and more of these arguments without like ever actually resolving or addressing any of the points we're talking about.
That occurred in the residential schools did not simply end once the schools themselves closed. They would then continue as the individuals would work into society. And I guess that's where I would leave that one. If I know Taylor hasn't talked very much, he wants to.
Lance is like, please, for the love of God, get me out of here.
Yeah.
I think Lauren would do a lot better if she toned her aggression and stuck to the material facts. I think she generally does. It's harder. it's impossible to separate being a man and being in society or whatever. Women just by default always sound bitchy, and men by default usually sound aggressive or strong. I don't know how you play into that dichotomy. It's really, really, really difficult. It's really hard. If you make an argument as a man and you're very impassioned, you can come off sounding like very dominant, very aggressive, very alpha, very much like a leader. But sometimes it feels like women can't get away with the same type of tone. You just end up sounding like a bitch because that's just like culturally where we're at. It's a really, really hard line to walk. Maybe there are ways where she phrasing better. I'm not sure, but yeah. We'll see if the rabbit's guy Connor's doing a good job at like remaining like relatively neutral. He doesn't sound very combative or whatever. Yeah. Lance is trying to like he's like begging in the ring. Tag me.
A response to that.
Yeah.
Everybody's pretty grab it.
Okay, because stating, prove to me that nothing bad ever happened.
Oh, thank God. I shouldn't say thank God, because technically I don't know whose side I'm taking. But like, yeah, that proved to me nothing ever bad. How the fuck are you supposed to do that?
At school is one of the dumbest statements I've ever heard. Something bad happens in every school, whether it is the fanciest.
Oh my God! But then she immediately fucking nosedived her argument and trying to compare the residential schools to every school. Oh no! What happened?
Nicest, wealthiest, whitest school on the planet. Bad things happen at every school. The argument there is that schools in the 1800s deliberately removing kids from their parents, taking them in, they're being abused, mass disease, horrible conditions, is different from a school that is set up, or a housing area that is set up voluntarily for kids to go and stay there so that they can be somewhere with a high school in the area. Like you have to acknowledge that there's a difference between a lot of the schools in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that when people talk about the residential school system still existing, were voluntary, they weren't being removed from their homes. They're called residential schools because they were still technically under colonial education, so they were not being taught their languages, they were not being taught their culture. And we can talk about how that could be a problem.
That's a good
But
concession.
to compare that to the residential schools where children were being ripped away from their families.
This is how you deal with this argument with whether you're conservative talking liberals or you're liberals talking conservatives. It's always good to acknowledge, like, yo, we can talk about how like the CDC got some stuff wrong in the beginning. For sure, that's valid. I can acknowledge that. But that doesn't mean the vaccine's gonna fucking kill you, right? Or like, bro, we can talk about the fact that yeah, the residential school shit, there was probably fucking shit, 100%. There was definitely abuse or whatever. But that's a far different claim than fucking genocide, right? It's different. It's good to concede a little, give a little bit of ground, and then pull them back into saying like this isn't what you're arguing though, rhetorically and argumentatively.
Is just not even on the same level, and I find that extremely disingenuous.
Thanks for jacking me, Jesse. Oh shit, did that meme come from your? Hold on, just for people that claim, because some people claim that I like copy Wash's Twitter because I stole a meme or yours. I don't actually steal memes from Twitter. If somebody posts a funny picture in my chat, I just jack it and I throw it on Twitter. So I'm sorry that can't be Twitter, my friend. We thank you, Conrad, for the meme expropriated now for our friend's Twitter.
Sure. So if that's the dumbest thing you've ever heard in your life, you've lived a more privileged life than I thought possible.
Lance is actually 1,000,000% correct here. Lauren is a white woman of extreme privilege because she's never actually subjected herself to a long-form conversation with Lance before. So he has inadvertently stated one of the most truest things in this entire fucking conversation. What? Like, what? Just that ad hom is so funny to me. Like, you've never heard a dumber argument before? You must be incredibly privileged. Wait, what? What's the implication there? Like, if I was selling drugs on the street, do these people engage in like a plethora of logical fallacies? My good debate friend, what's the implication there?
And I'm just going to say this: the burden of proof would then be upon you. If you're going to assert that this school doesn't really constitute a residential school because at the end of the day, nothing bad happened here.
That's not what she said. She said it was a residential school. Just the residential schools ran in the mid to late 1900s, probably a lot different than the residential schools ran in the 19th century.
Related to the same systems in place from the other residential schools in Canada, then again, please demonstrate that with some kind of factual evidence.
Guys, is Lance streaming? Can we get Lance 1,000 viewers so he can do what all the other lefties do when they can stop debating? Because goddamn, you notice that like they try to ride these debate vehicles until they have enough viewers, and then they're like, okay, I don't do debates anymore, blah blah blah, because obviously they can or whatever. I think we need to get Lance. We need to get Lance on that Micom or not Micom, the Micro PA Central Committee train, and we need to pop him up so that he leaves this life behind.
I mean, okay, so the Canadian government argued that it wasn't a residential school, but, and I'm telling you, sure, it is registered as a residential school, but the reason is this individual who wanted to get compensation was able to make the argument, I was removed from my family to go to an education system which did not uphold my language. And the removal from the family...
This is... So I normally wouldn't do this, but if you really want to dump on people, and I'll never do this because I feel bad and I think it's mean to do it. I'll only do it against people I really hate. What Lauren should have asked is she should have said, what do you know about the court case that determined whether or not this was a residential school? And then when Lance is forced to concede that he has no fucking idea like what any of that court case is, you've completely won, not even on the merits of the argument, but just on the lack of education of your opponent. That's what she should have done instead of divulging all this information to him, because now he's going to engage in a form of like, they call it, I think it's called hot reading, where somebody's having an active conversation with you and you're trying to like play off the conversation and make it seem you know things that you don't. He's getting the opportunity now because she's speaking information about this topic that he's probably never heard of before.
Was voluntary. His claim that it was his only option. And
why is it mean to do? Because I don't usually like to like be like, bro, do you even know what the fuck you're talking about? I don't know, it feels like a dick move, but...
And he claims that he was told he should go there, even though he only has a signed affidavit and no proof of that. People can go read the case themselves. So it's like, I'm just saying, if you want to say that's what residential schools were, and say that's the same as all the past ones, then I'm actually not feeling that bad for the past ones. But of course they're not the same.
God, her rhetoric, so why would you say that?
Of course. Like...
Yeah, what I'm saying is that you're being caught in the pedantry of trying to assert that this one residential school doesn't count.
You're the one that brought that residential school up. You can't say that. You're the one that said the last one was closed in 96. Well, let's talk about the one that was closed in 96. Well, I don't know anything about that one. You're being pedantic.
When at the end of the day, my statement, and it remains the same, was that the last residential school closed in 1996. That is just a factual statement.
Oh my god. This is like some Nazi Jordan Peterson shit. Well, I was just making this statement about this only closed in 1996. No, motherfucker, you're clearly implying that the residential school in 1996 was fucking electrocuting kids, returning their homework late. Okay, we all know what you were doing, okay? They were taking the kids, they turned their math homework in late, down to the fucking tuberculosis electric chair, okay, and shocking them until they ran away from the school and died of exposure. That's the image you're trying to conjure. Everybody in the conversation can see that's what's going on.
Okay, well,
okay, and now you would like to establish on top of that. Yes, and if you want to, and can you establish then that nothing bad happened in that school? And if you can, fine. But at the end of the day, like,
how can you establish that?
Again, this is pedantry. It's just look, this is probably one of the weakest gotchas I've seen so far.
It's not.
It was your argument. If it's a weak argument, it's your fault.
Okay,
Okay. So for another example of this and why it matters is some of the places called residential schools that
I think when you've got a winning argument like this, I think you should hammer home until you have a concession. Like, bring it back and ask again. Like this is where I say, in arguments like this, simple questions I think are incredibly powerful. So Lance, are you telling me that, say, the rates of children that died of tuberculosis in the 1996 residential school is the same as the school that would have been included in Dr. Bryce's report? Make them answer yes or no, right? Or like, okay, do you think that the way that students were treated in the 90s in residential schools is similar to how children were treated in the later parts of the 19th century and in the early parts of the 20th century? Make him say yes or no. Once you get him to solidify a position there, one of two things happen. Either one, he'll say yeah, in which case he's wrong, and then you destroy him on that. Or two, he says no, in which case then you bring back your second punch of like, okay, so then you understand why it's a little bit unreasonable for you to say residential schools had 40% of kids dying of tuberculosis, the last one was closed in 1996. You're making them all sound the same, right?
Became the name residential schools well into the 80s and 90s, or even run by native bands themselves. They were handed over. So if you're going to talk about how these residential schools were committing atrocities well into the 80s and 90s, then we're going to have to start punishing and asking for apologies from native bands themselves, like the Cowsays band, who held onto the residential school and ran it for 15 years.
He has no idea. How do they not? It's funny because it's not funny actually. I hate Lance, and like he is writing these fucking indigenous arguments to so many fucking shows to do his little fucking two-line spiel about a bunch of people that he really doesn't give a fuck about at the end of the day. Let's be honest, he doesn't. He doesn't give a fuck. Like the fact that he doesn't know anything about any of these arguments, and I've like osmosis half of this just from random people. This is another thing that I don't understand. I've gotten, and I'm super grateful, even those of you that disagree with me, because there've been a lot of you that emailed me that said that I was wrong on something related to indigenous issues. Generally, every time I talk about this shit, I get a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds that email me. I had the geologist email me about the graphic scan. I've had multiple indigenous people email me. I've got a friend that is like a PhD that teaches in Saskatchewan, whatever the fuck that thing is, and she's talked about her experience. So I have a lot of people that are giving me feedback, and even without like having to study this like a lot. Like I've got a lot of information. I would imagine that Lance's community must be similar if he's literally got the fucking indigenous man's like I don't know if I can say mascot if that's racist, but like this guy is like I play indigenous video games, talking about indigenous history, blah blah blah. Like damn, how have you guys not like looked up at least like the absolute most fucking basic parts of any of these arguments? How is that possible? How you know? It's almost like, and I hate to say this, and it's very sad, but it's almost like on the maturity report when Sam Cedar got caught, not having any fucking idea what Citizens United was. Like, dog, wait, I guarantee you that if I go back to your fucking show, you guys have probably said that Citizens United needs to be revoked like 4 million fucking times. Like, how do you not know what it's about? Like, even just the basic court case. Oh man, sorry, jeez.
Yes, it does matter what happened and what these schools turned into later on.
Either of you free to respond?
Oh, sorry.
They're like, we're not even like having an argument yet. We're like having, and this is, by the way, this is why when people ask me like, what are your good debates? I don't have good debates. Because in order to have a debate, you need to, one, have an agreement on descriptive fact, and then from that agreement, you have this epistemic similarity, so you can agree on what's real. And then from there, now we're gonna have a debate on what ought we do. And that's where the real debate is. It's like, okay, we agree about this fact, this fact, this fact, and this fact. Cool. We agree on the facts, now let's argue what we should do. And this is where we bring in like the morality and the ethics arguments, and then this is where we bring in like our normative frameworks. Like, is it good to do this if it hurts some and help? That's where the real interest is. Like, I don't ever get to have those discussions. I never get to have those discussions. Instead, it's like, like, oh, well, the vaccine, turns children into fucking tumor babies. Like, okay. Or like, oh, like, well, I don't think that anybody did anything wrong here. Like, oh, like, Michael Brown didn't do anything bad. Breonna Taylor was, assassinated. It's like, okay, so what you're telling me is I don't get to have any fun conversation today. It's gonna be us just reading past the headline of Twitter articles. That's what we're doing today. Okay, cool. Nice. That's like 99% of my fucking conversations. Okay.
I didn't know if Tayl's still here.
At this point, I'm just baffled. So far, we've denied the Indian Act. We've denied the removal policy. We've denied that because one guy said a bad thing incorrectly once, therefore all atrocities never happened.
No one has ever said any of that. I'm so curious how, I guess Dylan's viewers are in the middle. No one has said any of that, my dude. Wait, hey, that rabbit guy, if he's a small dude, yo, I'll give him a free host. If he wants to come on afterwards and chat about his performance in this conversation, should be good. More spotlight for indigenous issues. I am so curious. What the fuck was going through this guy's mind? Oh my god.
Say no justice happens.
Let's let him finish.
We denied mass graves exist, even though the definition of mass is big.
No! I can't look this up on my screen because I don't know if it'll show bodies. I wonder what Wikipedia says mass graves are. A mass grave is a grave containing multiple human corpses, which may or may not be identified prior to burial. The United Nations has defined a criminal mass grave as a burial site containing 3 or more victims of execution, although an exact definition is not unanimously agreed upon. Mass graves are usually created after many people die or are killed, and there is a desire to bury the corpses quickly for sanitation concerns. A mass grave does not just mean there are a lot of bodies buried somewhere. That's not at all. I kind of want to go to sleep. When you start off and you say something so mind-numbingly fucking stupid like that, like, you think a mass grave just means there's a lot of bodies? Like, why are you you're clearly not equipped to even be in the same room as people having this conversation. Like, by your definition, literally every single cemetery is a mass grave. Like, oh, did you go to the mass grave yesterday and visit grandpa? Like, yeah. Like,
Wait.
That's what we said.
Let's let him finish.
We denied mass graves exist, even though the definition of mass is big. So at this point, I'm just lost. What definition
Also, I don't think that is the definition of mass. That's the definition of massive. But no, I'm sorry.
are we even working with? I'd really like some clarification on some of this. I mean,
That's not true, actually, because mass shooting. It's not called mass shooting. It's mass shooting, if I'm being fair, right?
Graveyard a mass grave?
if we're going to
Oh,
throw
she even
out
gets that point. Nice.
the Indian Act as even a discussable topic,
No one is literally. Have they even gotten into the Indian Act? I don't even know what the fuck the Indian Act is. Why is he bringing it up? It's because he's read about this particular thing and he's trying to find a way to shoehorn it into this conversation.
then feel free. I have no trouble with that, because as I was led to believe, the initial conversation was on restorative justice. If we're going to backtrack on that topic, okay.
Okay, we're not backtracking on shit. If you want to talk about that topic, then start talking about
Thank you. Good. Don't stop making concessions to this fucking loser.
that topic. But like seriously, all right. So I literally took 10 seconds to Google the word mass grave. It says a pit
Oh,
dug
no.
in the ground to receive a large amount of corpses.
Yep.
If a lot of bodies are buried individually because they're dead, then like is a cemetery a mass grave?
Do you have evidence that they were all individually dug?
Bro, you're making the claim. You're making the claim. It's the onus is on you to do this.
According to Lauren,
I can't tell you that there were individual bodies with the GPR.
Lauren, I'm not trying. Okay, let me not be a dick. Okay, I'm not gonna be a dick. I'm just gonna try to break it down. So
are you both incapable of letting me finish the sentence?
I'm
According to
perfectly-
Lauren, only a few moments ago, we're talking about pits, right? According to Lauren, GPR is incapable of identifying bodies, so how would it know whether or not they were all buried at the same time?
Oh my god, he doesn't know what a GPR is. The ground penetrates. Imagine it to be like sonar or radar. Like I don't think it can tell whether or not. Maybe if it was like a soft, squishy human, it could. But all it can tell is if something is there. Number one. Number two. Even if it can't tell exactly if there are bodies or not, it probably could tell if it was a mass grave or not. For instance, if you guys get one giant clump in one area versus something that's more like dispersed. Because ask yourself, this is so fucking stupid. Because ask yourself this: how the fuck is a ground penetrating radar scanner? How can there be a proper resolution to tell you that there can be 250 individual corpses if they're all fucking buried in one fucking like pile with each other? How can that even happen? Like, what is your thought? Do you think that the scan is going through and it's like fucking Law or not Law and Order? What's the name of that crazy show where they have insane technology? Where it's like, oh my god, we got like a 3D image of everything that was fucking buried. Like the fucking NSA came in and they're like ultra high tech scans or whatever, and now we can see exactly. Like, Jesus Christ. Okay, sorry.
okay, so I'll address this because I'm not Lauren. If you want me to.
He needs to be mean. At this point, I would start to get mean for a variety of reasons. One, I would call this guy a grifting piece of shit. If he's indigenous, he should feel even worse about being a grifting piece of shit because you clearly have not read or studied any parts of this conversation, and you came to debate who you believe to be a Nazi. Okay, like what the fuck is wrong with you? Talk about irresponsible platforming.
Feel free.
Okay, what I would say is that based off of all of the reading that I've made, there's plenty, and for the audience at fucking home again, I'm just trying to be descriptive, I'm not trying to justify, okay? Trying to be descriptive so we can all get on the same page descriptively, all right? On the same page, let's keep going. As far as I can tell, from what I've seen from the historical record of the Canadian residential school system, what happened was, let's just call it cultural genocide. They took kids forcibly from people's homes, brought them to a boarding school, forced them to all live together with very limited supervision because of poor conditions, malnutrition, and basically lack of supervision. Kids were abused, kids had improper medical care, they had improper nutrition, and a bunch of them died from very, I don't want to say tuberculosis is an easily preventable disease, but from disease, okay? A significant chunk of them died from disease from the condition.
Just as a heads up, this is what a GPR scan looks like, okay? There's a buried, I don't know if it's a water tank or a fuel tank, here in the top left, okay? This is what a GPR scan looks like, all right? It is not some ultra fucking high resolution, like ultra fucking detailed, like satellite image with perfect fucking like resolution and contrast, whatever. Like, Jesus Christ.
That they were forced into, okay? We're conceding that point. Now, also, on top of that, a lot of them died in fires because these buildings were built like shit, okay? So a decent chunk of them died from fires. And then even on top of that, a lot of kids tried to escape because the conditions were so poor and they died from exposure. That is the historical record as far as I understand it. Now, if we're gonna bring this down to the American level, I can tell you that the United States of America, especially before the 19th century, does have mass graves. Guaranteed. Because what we did instead is we just fucking killed Native Americans, okay? So again, this is a spectrum of awful. I'm not trying to say it's good or bad, I'm just trying to be descriptive. So when we're talking about these graves, we're probably talking about kids who died either from tuberculosis, fire, or exposure, and they were probably buried after they were dead. Mass grave to me, because maybe I'm just a layperson, but mass grave to me implies that we are marching people out into an area, we're fucking killing them, and we're throwing them in a pit.
And that's how most people, especially in Canada, hear mass grave. Absolutely.
That is my understanding of it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my understanding.
As opposed to digging a hole for all of the bodies of the kids who died in the fire that all happened at once?
Oh my god. I hate this guy. I actually hate this guy. I don't know who this guy is, but I actually super hate him. I just want to say props to Lance, because I wonder if Lance realized, like, fuck, like, I'm dumb as shit. I need to try to find the one motherfucker in the universe that can look worse than me in this debate. And he did it. Props to him for that. I would assume that would be an impossible task, but Lance managed to pull it off, so.
Yeah, do you think that the priest set the fire, or do you think it was accidental? Because that's kind of important.
Do you think that there's no such thing as a mass grave at these residential schools using the conditions that you yourself just set on the
What's up?
Can I just let me?
Quick, because I'm watching this debate. We're not sidetracking.
Yes, no, okay, but specifically about this, I want to give some insight into how just absolutely batshit Lance is being here. Like, I was part of the Indigenous Studies program, like the most left-leaning institution in the country, and I don't know any really of the people except for Lance and a bit of Florence Southern. But what the guy just said is literally what we're taught in Indigenous Studies by survivors of residential schools. Like, is Lance trying to say that there's anything more than that?
The problem that we're running into, and this is a big problem, is that when people say mass graves, which is the term being used so much, I don't know if you understand this or not, but my understanding is that to a general population, mass graves sounds like you executed a lot of people and you wanted to basically hide the bodies or just throw them all in a fucking pit and walk away from it. But so if there's like a cemetery where a bunch of people were buried and like they died, even if they died like tuberculosis and then it was around, whatever, you wouldn't call it a mass grave typically.
No, there's unmarked graves.
Sure. Yeah, and if they're unmarked graves, that's not bad too, definitely. But like mass grave carries with it like a very specific, like almost Holocaust-like definition to it. Yeah.
Yeah, but sorry, so because I joined a bit late, Lance is arguing this whole an hour and a half has been on.
Well, the problem is Lance is arguing anything. He doesn't know anything about this. But the problem is the other guy is trying to make this argument like, well, mass grave is just anywhere where lots of people are buried, and that's what he's using to say mass grave, which is stupid as fuck. But
That's the entire. How long has this been going for?
I don't know, but this whole conversation is literally, it's not like, yeah, it's pretty sad. None of those left-leaning people like did any homework on like what anything said about anything, so they're basically just gonna steamroll the whole time, which is especially troubling because to them, like Lauren is literally like a fucking Nazi queen, and so I don't know why they didn't come more prepared. Like they didn't know anything about the first gravesite found. They didn't know anything about like Lance deciding this report by Dr. Bryce. I don't think he realizes that report was in 1907. It wasn't a modern day thing. Like, so yeah, I don't know. It's just, but yeah, okay. Oh my God,
Okay, bye.
Stop making shit, Jack.
Description of the definition of that term.
Fine, Tail, you fucking win, okay? Maybe 7 kids were all buried at the same time, and it's a mass grave.
Oh, I don't know if Lauren's getting mad or something. Oh, you totally should not concede this point. Why the fuck would you concede that point?
Can we get to the fucking descriptive part of it? Like, can we get back to like
You should not give that term. Absolutely, you should not give that term. Okay.
reality?
I would love to.
I really
That's it.
jump in here. Okay, I have a question for you. So we're talking about the mass graves that the media have alleged happened, that Lance has been tweeting about, that progressives have been tweeting about, and you're saying that they are mass graves where people just dug pits, because I just want to let everyone know, GPR technology can only find anomalies in the soil. It can't find bodies. So the way that they are trying to find, or how they claim they're trying to find these individual bodies, or find these numbers, how they're getting the 250 number, how they're getting that 750 number, is they're saying they're finding burial spots and graves. And that's why some have also been mistaken for that they said they were, native children buried, but it ended up just being a graveyard. So if we're talking about GPR technology that is finding individual graves, and these are what is being called mass graves, they literally cannot be mass graves, because it's only detecting individual burial spots.
So this is also true. I believe that when they went to look for a lot of these burial spots, I think it was First Nations people that were leading them to spots. Like we believe there was a cemetery or something. That's my understanding, and I remember reading from an article. I could be wrong on that, but that was my understanding for how they conducted a lot of these searches. If somebody knows something, chat, feel free to link it. That shows something. But it's not like they're not just going all around Canada like indiscriminately zapping the ground and trying to find anomalies. Obviously, it would be possible, right?
So no, this whole idea that you're saying that, yes, it was pits and bodies were thrown in, no. Based on the technology that was used and the way they are counting and getting these numbers, it's impossible.
No, I've already conceded it. You can't take it back.
Oh, dude, I hate doing a debate. No. Bastia didn't do this to me that much. Oh my god, when I have a debate partner that is trying to, take the wind out of my sails, and it's like, bro, this is not a point we're gonna concede.
Forever. That's the record now.
Okay, I see. All right, mass graves, whatever.
Oh, no, and look at Lance. Now Lance feels like he won that argument.
Okay, if that's
Oh, that absolutely should have never been a point you conceded. There's just absolutely no reason to concede that point. It's so silly.
Establish what crimes happened to talk about retributive justice is we need to know what the retributive justice we're discussing was for, right?
Sure,
That's why we're discussing.
absolutely. Okay, so I'd like to answer that one for you. This is a question to both counterpoints and Lauren. As of now, how many priests and nuns have been convicted for sexual crimes against children as a result of the residential school system?
Dude, I'm on the same page. If priests and nuns committed sexual assault against kids, put them in jail. But build a mass in their life. But this shit happened in the U.S. This shit happened at boys' schools in Florida. This shit happened in Ireland. It was horrific. And I hope every one of those things investigated. We don't disagree on that. And if it didn't happen, it should happen. What we're disagreeing on is whether churches should be burned down today and whether there were mass graves.
Rhetorically, this is a good, right? So you make the concession immediately, don't fight on that point. Yeah, if this should happen, it should be investigated, absolutely, right? But we're not talking about that. We're talking about fucking mass graves and genocide, right?
So do you want to attempt to answer the question because Lauren seems unable to?
How many? I don't know.
Dude, Lance is such an asshole, and that's okay. I think it's funny being an asshole. I just think that if you're gonna be an asshole in a conversation, I think you have to earn it. You have to establish some facts, show that your opponent is engaging in bad faith. Then I think you can start coming in with the fuck you, bitch. Take them out with those big ad homs. I'm all for it. I am totally fucking here if you want to dick out in a fucking debate. I think it's funny. I think you can knock people down a peg. I think it makes you look bad, but it's like a Jackie Chan movie, right? Jackie Chan wins his fights doing some crazy fucking shit. But he always starts every fight from behind, right? Jackie Chan doesn't walk into a club with 3 friends and beat the shit out of him. He's always down in numbers. He's always down in position. He always doesn't have a weapon at the start. He's always naked and fucking. I think in every fucking Chinese Jackie Chan movie, he's always naked in one scene. I don't know why, right? But if you want to have your glorious finish, you have to earn it. You need to do something to earn it. You can't just open with that because then you just look like an asshole.
No, I don't want to answer how many. I was going to back her up on a moral point. So no, please.
Okay, sure. No, I'm sure we're all against pedophilia. So as of now, there's been 40 convictions, and that means that there's been 37,951 complaints that have been levied. They have not been pursued. As of now, an estimated 5,000 priests, nuns, and teachers have committed sex crimes against these children, and they're not being charged for that. The first time.
So it is rhetorically, it's effective for Lance to cite numbers here. You can always do that and look good. This is going to be a really sad fact, but the reality is that pushing cases through like this is probably never going to happen. How the fuck are you going to do that, right? If you get 3 kids to come and yo, this person raped me, how do you even begin to take that person to court and file charges? How are you ever going to begin to? We saw this right now. We watch JCS videos. Now we're legal experts, right? How are you ever? Why would I don't know how your shows up. I don't know what you have. How would your prosecuting body in Canada decide to start allocating resources to these crimes? This group of people said that they were raped, 40 years ago by this priest or not. I'm sorry, it sucks, but how could you ever get a conviction there, right?
Anyone was put to task for this was in 2008, and that was somebody who had molested 17 boys, and that was the first major conviction. So this is what I mean when I say that there hasn't actually been retributive justice.
Yeah, sorry, fuck. Connor, I hope you knock this one out of the park because you're the goddamn fucking ex-cop. You can't. It's so hard to do investigations on these types of crimes. It's never gonna happen. I'm sorry. The circumstantial evidence isn't gonna be there. Your DNA and shit, and your direct testimony is literally probably only gonna come from those involved who said oh, that person raped me. So it's literally one person's word against another person's word. You're not gonna get big convictions. It's just not. It's not gonna happen. I'm sorry. Connor should know this because he's got the cop background or whatever.
In this case, right? If we're dealing with thousands and thousands of priests, nuns, and teachers with sexually molested children, that would be a place to start. I mean, unlike the Catholic churches who at this point we do not know who's burning them down, in this case we do know who committed these heinous crimes.
I don't like the cover that you provided. We don't know who's burning these churches down. I think it's probably pretty obvious, right?
Okay, then to address this head on,
yep.
This is where, again, I'm not your enemy in this fight at all. So if anybody touched any kid of any background and abused them, then what I think the system should do to them is not even fit for Twitch, okay? And I don't care who that person is, what institution they're part of, whether or not they're a member of my race, whether or not it was an institution supported by the government. Go after them with the full force of the law and punish them accordingly.
The big rhetorical question here is what they should ask is, why haven't they? Do they think that the government is providing active cover for child rapists for cases they know they could go after, or is the evidence just incredibly scant?
Both state that at this point the Catholic Church should stop withholding the names of those who may be guilty.
What does that even mean?
If you're talking about putting them public and you're saying maybe guilty, no, I don't think people on trial for sex crimes that haven't been confirmed guilty should be put public, because usually what happens is if they're found innocent.
Yeah, sorry, but when you motherfuckers are running around burning down churches, I would not want to be somebody that worked tangentially with one of these schools and have my name released on a fucking list that Vivian is going to be spreading around fucking Discord. Fuck that.
Falsely accused, their lives get destroyed for something they didn't do. So until there is a crime and a conviction that happens, of course keep the names private. But I think those convictions should be, they should try to get those convictions if the person is guilty to the utmost of their ability. Now we have to recognize, and this is a horrible thing, but it's very, very difficult to prove these crimes retrospectively that happened a long, long time ago. And if we're going to have a justice system at all, if we're going to have a system that says innocent until proven guilty, that has to be the standard. We can't just throw people in jail because we think or just based on an accusation without proof. And that sucks. It sucks that reality is like that. But what also sucks? People who did nothing going to jail for the rest of their lives for a sex crime they didn't commit. That's just, yeah.
I'm curious why we keep setting this as a long, long time ago. I was still figuring out Windows 95 when the last of the boarding schools in Canada was closed. There were even still a few that are open today.
This guy is the dumbest motherfucker. He actually is beyond fucking stupid. It is irresponsible that Lance brought this guy to this debate, and that's saying something. I don't know what video game he stumbled out of, but he needs to go back to playing those. I recommend League of Legends, my friend.
United States, these are...
Do you think that's self-harm? I'm gonna have to delete my bot for that. I know that you can still tell people, I don't know if you can tell people to kill themselves or like play League of Legends. I don't know if you can like wish that harm on somebody. That might be like a, that might be TOS now on Twitch. Sorry. I take it back. You can do other forms of whatever, but I'm not wishing League upon you. I'm sorry. I don't mean that.
Ongoing crimes.
We address that, keep up.
Then address it again.
Okay, not to mention, even a rape committed against anyone in the 90s would be very difficult to prove and get evidence for today. I'm not even sure when we started getting these systems in place for rape kits in Canada. Like, when did that even come about? I'd have to research that, but this is, like, it's very difficult to prove these historical cases.
I just want to address this point head on because I don't want to feel like we're dodging. Okay, so what we said was that during the early 20th century and during the late 19th century, there were brutal fucking conditions. And as these things became less and less acceptable, some of these schools were turned over to native control. Some of these schools that ended in 1996, as Lance pointed out, that Lauren supposedly has a study for, that I don't have a study for, was literally just a fucking boarding school for Native American kids. Now, I can't prove to you that no sex abuse happened because whenever there's fucking teenagers...
This is a layup for Lance and the rabbit guy if they knew anything about that school. Did anything bad happen? Oh, then just say it, and boom, you shut them down completely. Well, actually, in that 1996 school, 20% of children came out of there accusing, not even with conviction, accusing the administrators of sexual assault or sexual abuse. Oh, 20% of those people committed suicide. Boom, that's a layup. That's a fucking layup. If you want to cite that 96 school, you need to have at least one data point to prove how it's so fucking horrible. Like,
anywhere, fucking sex abuse happens. Sex abuse happened at my white suburban...
Oh my god, I'm sorry. I love children. I have a child. I hate when I hear people go, anytime a child is touched, there should be punishment. Okay, bro, we get it. Wow, child rape bad. Thank you. Go to the next fucking thing. I don't need to hear you like talk about how horrible this is for like 5 minutes, okay?
Bullshit fucking school. Kids were doing cocaine in the fucking bathroom and having fucking sex. I can't tell you that nothing bad happens anywhere, okay? But what I can say is that if you wanted to pick a school that you wanted to live in as a fucking time traveler, then you wouldn't want to go to the one in the 1920s because there was probably a significant chance that you would get your ass kicked and nobody would give a shit. You would die of tuberculosis or you would die in a fucking fire. Whereas if you went to the boarding school in 1992 and it was Native American run and it was fucking, then basically there's a strong chance that it was just a normal boarding school with all of the boarding school problems that we have today. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so the key difference here. I just have one quick point.
Wait, no. What I'm talking about. So far, I just got the time. So far, Lauren has talked more than both Lance and Tail combined. So I want to make sure that I give Lance and Tail some time to speak uninterrupted for a little bit.
Well, Tail, that's because they have nothing to say. They have no arguments. They have no data. They don't know the cases they're talking about. They don't know the history of this. Yeah, of course they haven't said anything. They have nothing to say.
Lance?
Sure,
Lance, oh god, this is like he didn't have his hand up and the teacher called on him to fucking talk about like, well, can you tell us now, in clear terms, what were the 4 primary contributions to why the United States had a revolutionary war? Well, the British colonies had a revolutionary war, I should say.
I want to address counterpoints. The difference there between what you stated and what happened is that they didn't choose to go to these schools. They were taken and forced to go to these schools. So even if you do say that there are institutions in which there are multiple people committing sex crimes, whatever that is, this is still a situation in which the children were forcibly removed from their parents and forced to be in schools. So again, as wards of the state, everything that occurs to them is responsibility of
No, that's not how it works. Just because it's a state-ran school doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect. There's always going to be liabilities like everywhere. Like, sorry, by the way, in U.S. schools, bad things happen. In U.S. public schools, bad things happen. Like, that's just going to be the case everywhere. If something bad happens, the state should be liable, so you either sue them or whatever. But like, it's not like you're ever going to have no bad things happening anywhere. That's such a stupid standard to set.
either the Catholic Church or the government of Canada.
Okay, let's get to the meat of this real quick because no one's denying bad things happen.
Lance was just given an argument to talk as long as he could, and that was just one response.
And no one's denying bad things are bad. The only disagreement here is you guys seem to think they're mass graves. There's no evidence for them. Do you still think they're mass graves after this discussion? How many bodies have been exhumed at these graves that have recently been discovered?
So that seems to be the only thing that you're trying to propose as your conditions. But if you didn't listen to what Dylan just said, he said that you'd spoken most in this debate, and so he's going to give Tails and Rabbits a chance to speak.
Dude, I'm going to say, Lance is the most squad W motherfucker. Oh, that was a misuse. I'm so sorry, Trey, my bad. Oh my god.
Okay, he's happy to. I was just trying to get back on topic and then to the church for
Yeah, but yeah.
Well,
that's the topic we agree on.
Okay. Tail, if you want to speak,
He has nothing to say. Why did they agree to do this debate? Why did they agree to do this? Why?
You're free to speak.
At this point, I'm a little bit lost. There's been a lot of philosophical quibbling over the definition of the word mass grave, to the point where someone had to Google it because they didn't even know the definition coming into the game.
Bro, you didn't know the definition. You said it meant mass. There were a lot of bodies.
Which I think is a little bit inappropriate if you're going to be discussing a topic. You should at least be mildly prepared.
What is this projection? Oh my god.
You're free to speak.
At this point, I'm a little bit lost. There's been a lot of philosophical quibbling over the definition of the word mass grave, to the point where someone had to Google it because they didn't even know the definition coming into the game, which I think is a little bit inappropriate if you're going to be discussing a topic. You should at least be mildly prepared. And when we're talking about things like ground-penetrating radar, I again go back. If we're going to challenge the findings of those who have done the research, then you're challenging the foundation of archaeology in the Americas. If you would like to do that and lay out your argument for a better technique for identifying locations that should be excavated, I welcome you to do so. You haven't proposed anything remotely resembling that. What you did instead was to say that you went to school with a person whose name you can't pronounce, who is somehow vaguely related to a company who's hardly not listed anywhere on the company's prospectus.
I would actually lose it. I would lose it at this point. I think I would lose it. I think this would be the straw for me, and then I would start getting very, very, very mean and very personal.
That's not terms, that's not definitions, and that's certainly not facts. That's just random anecdotes.
I have just posted the article in the chat.
Connor, shut the fuck up.
Lord, please, for the love of God. Tail, Twin Rabbits, I'm pretty sure your brain is running on 1995, okay?
Never mind. Connor, fucking, you're clear for takeoff.
We're fucking 30 minutes into this goddamn debate talking about, like, I don't know, terms about fucking murder and descriptive reality and history and all that kind of shit, and you want to talk to Lauren about fucking GPR and whether or not she can offhand fucking come up with a new way to conduct anthropology? I don't give a shit. Fucking catch up. Because basically what you're doing right now is you're acting smarter than everybody else in the fucking room while saying absolutely fucking nothing.
Absolutely fucking true. Okay, thank you. Never mind, Connor. You redeemed yourself. For the whole debate so far, you're at fucking 9 out of 10. Keep it up, Chief. I don't know if I say Chief on this debate, actually, sorry.
If you want to take your fucking galaxy brain fucking 10 head and your individual experience, then please educate us. But if I have to hear fucking Lauren's a dumbass about GPR one more fucking time for 35 fucking seconds, I'm gonna fucking lose it. So either educate us, talk about the subject, keep up the fucking conversation, or just don't bring up GPR again, because I don't give a fuck, and I don't trust Lauren to reinvent anthropology in the next fucking 10 minutes. Okay, so let's
by the
move.
way, I just really need to make the point that I'm not making this up. I'm excited.
No, Lauren,
Okay, sorry.
please, in the future, do not do that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Rabbits, I want you to respond to Connor. He said a lot. Or if you want to respond, it's completely
I think your brain is still running in 1995. That was a good one.
I mean, if he needs to take a little break and get a glass of water, that's fine.
Oh my god. What a loser. What a sucky fucking piece of shit. God, this guy is such a cringe fucking demon. This guy is a cringe demon. He's the grown-up version of this guy.
Oh my. Well, I'm not entirely sure, actually. It just sort of happened, and I enjoyed it, and I just sort of stuck with it. The end.
I have no objection.
Okay.
He's giving so much. It's like a League of Legends game, okay? It's like a League of Legends game. When I'm playing League, I'm getting ganked fucking every fucking 2 seconds, okay? 4-man bot, 5-man bot, 4-man bot, 6-man bot, because my own jungle comes and feeds. I'm watching this guy in a debate, and the moderator's cutting off the other people saying, hey, would you like a time to speak uninterrupted? Yes, I would love to speak. I'll speak uninterrupted I'll do it for 10 hours. I'm a fucking streamer. I'll speak as much as you fucking want me to. It's a debate. I can't be here to talk, motherfucker. And this guy has nothing to say. How? I have nothing to say. This is your fucking schoolhouse, dude. This is your purview. This is the whole subject matter that you fucking spent your whole fucking Twitch career researching, supposedly, okay? Do you remember a story or plotline when any indigenous games you say you grind on stream? Like, what are you doing? What is that? Bro, wake up. Still on Red Bull's couch.
I want to go over to Lance since again.
Dylan is begging. Dylan in the background. Don't confuse this for Dylan being a good moderator, okay? Because Dylan in the background is thinking like, oh my god, the fucking Nazi woman has spoken for like fucking 50 minutes, and these two other dumb fucks that are supposed to shit on her haven't said fucking shit. I need you guys to talk more because everybody's gonna talk about how this is irresponsible platforming. Lance, please, probably giving like Lance. I got people in chat looking at studies. Maybe you should look at the fucking Twitch chat. Neither of you are talking, so you got plenty of time to fucking read. Please come up with a better argument. Dylan's probably freaking out because he knows he's getting shit on for this fucking debate.
Is extremely lopsided at the moment. Sure, both sides get ample speaking time. Lance, do you want to say anything?
Well, just to counterpoint's statement there, if Lauren is making the assertion that she believes, in this case, that this technology is not representational of the fact that there are mass graves, or perhaps we're lost again in the semantics of what constitutes a mass grave, then that is not on Tail to have to educate anyone on. He's simply stating that she is putting into—
I'm sorry, you dumb, brick-shaped face motherfucker. You are literally here to educate people. It is a debate on these very topics. What the fuck do you think you came here for?
question the findings, which have already been agreed upon, by the way, by most of Canadians. This is not something that's—
just for the record, I told her in advance that this is the Lance strategy. What he'll do is he says one thing, you call him out on it, and he always runs back to those other 5 points, and then you call him out on point 2, and he'll always run back to the other 5 points, then you call him out, always the same thing. Notice how he's repeating over and over and over and over and over. He's repeating the same fucking thing. Like, well, everyone agrees on this. Well, all this atrocities are like, bro.
Being disproven. This is again being stuck in semantics, and I can see Lauren's losing her mind in the process of hearing.
I would be losing my mind.
This. There's a reason why multiple people, including everyone here's favorite Justin Trudeau, has come forward and stated that yes, we'd like to apologize for this. We've acknowledged that this was genocide. That it is
Trudeau. I'm pretty sure when we looked it up last. Now I could be wrong. Maybe there's been a more recent statement. When we looked it up last, I'm pretty sure Trudeau wasn't willing to go as far as to say it was a genocide. I think he specifically did not say that term. When we looked it up, he kind of like danced around it, but that's not that relevant to us.
An ongoing process. He's become the first sitting prime minister to say that.
All the relevant facts.
Justin Trudeau.
All the relevant
facts. It's reached the point now.
All the relevant
something
facts.
that is being, let's just say, debated.
If it's not being debated, then why are you here to debate it, you dumb motherfucker? What are you here for? What is wrong with you?
I'll leave Tail to finish up.
Go on,
I'll leave it to Tail to finish. They're trying to bail each other. Dylan's messaging me. He's like, bro, Tail, fucking. Or Lance is messaging me. Dylan keeps messaging me. He says we need to do better, bro. I gotta hand this off to you because I don't know anything about this. Please.
There's a point now where this is not something that is being, let's just say, debated. I'll leave Tail to finish up.
Go on, I understood that the topic was supposed to be retributive justice, and we still haven't talked about that.
So talk about it, Brody.
Can I respond? Just a 2-second response here.
No. Hold on. Just
okay,
hold on.
Hold on.
Well, I got interrupted there by counterpoints for just a moment. I was willing to let him finish, I suppose. But in any case, I'm not particularly interested in educating you. If you would like to talk to me after.
Why are you here? It's so dumb, bro. If any alt-writer wants to talk to me and they want me to educate them on like fucking culture or some shit like that, I'll talk all day if you want to do this shit. What the fuck? What do you mean?
But that's fine. I'd be happy to provide you plenty of information on the subject of ground-penetrating radar. I know it frustrates you when I say that term. I'm not concerned with that. And that wasn't what the thesis of my statement actually was. I said we're quibbling over definitions because I haven't been confronted with any facts. So, that's my concern. If you would like to somehow contradict what I said there,
You haven't said anything.
feel free to do so. But as I understood it, the topic here was about retributive justice. So I would like to know what the two of you mean when you talk about that so that we can discuss it.
We're going to talk about retributive justice. It sounds like retributive means to like justice based on punishment of offenders rather than okay, just making sure it didn't mean like some crazy shit that I didn't know about. Okay, if we're going to talk about retributive justice, we're going to have to talk about the wrongs that were done first because that's kind of sort of half the equation. Retributive, which I'm guessing shares a root with the word retribution, refers to punishment or some sort of retributive action for a past wrong that has been done. So we kind of need to talk about the past wrong. We're going to talk about what type of retribution is appropriate for it. Like,
I'm interested in discussing.
Dare mansplain.
Okay, I'm gonna mansplain.
Don't dare. Give me 1 minute because I just really need to respond to this one point. We have to determine if there was a genocide or not because that was part of this topic. So that's why we're discussing this. And I really need to respond to the fact that Lance and Taylor Twin Rabbits have just spent their whole last chat talking about how I've not provided any proof. And I'm trying to reestablish the whole field of archaeology and anthropology. And I've made this up. That is not true. I've linked to the Globe and Mail article in our Discord chat. And this is what the researcher who found the initial graves that sparked this all off said. My findings cannot be confirmed unless excavations are done, which is why we need to pull back a little bit, and they are probable burials. They are targets of interest for sure, said Dr. Bellio, who has about a decade of experience in the field, including working with the RCMP. She said the sites have multiple signatures that present like burials, but we do need to say that they are probable until one excavates, because we actually don't know the story behind them. We don't know if there's even bodies in there. We don't know if this is an overgrown graveyard, and these are the facts. I'm citing researcher. This is not something I'm making up, and you guys need to stop asserting that.
Sure. Can I respond to that?
Yes, I just want to make it very clear. I see kind of raising your hand. I really want to give some, and I'm going to. This is the last time I'm going to do it.
he's trying so hard. Lance and Rabbit, please say anything. You're getting crushed. Please say a single fucking thing. Please.
So please take advantage of the opportunity that because of.
Has there ever been a debate in the history of all of fucking Dylan kind? Dylan, are you here? Where you had to beg somebody on one side to talk more? Like, please say something. Please, bro. My whole Twitch fucking channel. You don't give a fuck if you don't fucking say it. Please, bro. Please.
The difference in speaking time is very great right now, so I want to make sure that both sides are probably represented. Lance, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so when it comes to the finding of the children, what you're doing, Lauren, is not presenting any facts. What you're doing is that you're trying to selectively use parts of an article, the Globe and Mail article I have it before me right now, in order to assert a conspiratorial claim. Now, if we look at, let's say, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, all right, which is the largest study that has ever been done in this field, is one that was started in 2008, cost over $100 million to do.
Again, this is the same Gish Gallop. This is the same Gish Gallop. This is what he does. Now you're gonna go back and you're gonna dance to the 50 other points. Go back, dance, get challenged on argument, go back and dance around all the points. Get challenged on argument, go back and dance on the points. He does this so many times.
It was one that interviewed thousands upon thousands again of indigenous survivors who experienced the horrors and atrocities of the residential schools. The consensus and the broad consensus by this commission was overwhelmingly that not only did this constitute genocide, but that there was multiple children who had died at these schools and yes, were buried near the schools themselves. This was was part of the findings of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So what you're trying to do, and what you often do, and what I'm sure Rebel News has taught you very well to do, is to try and take selective parts of an article that you have here in the Golden Mail and then utilize that to try and extrapolate a theory. And that's just not going to cut it in terms of what we're talking about now. I think eventually we should move on to the idea of Catholic churches. Is that something you want to talk about? But one of the final points that I wanted to move on to, if you want to talk about Canadian genocide and talk about the process, is move on to the child care and the foster care system. But I see Cameron Quince has his hand up, so let him talk.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, one more time. I just want to give one last opportunity to
Rabbit, please, can you say something? You're supposed to be the expert here, please.
Connor. Law and order, okay? I just want to give one last opportunity to tell two rabbits to speak at this point so we can rebalance time slots. Rabbit?
I'm fine. Counterpoint seems very interested to go.
Okay, Connor.
I know it won't count for anything or whatever, but like I hope that Lance gets like actually lambasted for how absolutely fucking embarrassing. This is twice now in a row that he's gone into one of these conversations against somebody that he should deem, like, again, remember, in Lance's eyes, Lauren is still like the fucking like covert Nazi queen, right? He went into a debate with JF, not being prepared to talk about fucking eugenics. When JF is literally like a eugenics nationalist fucking person, like that's like all he talks about, right? Like he came in here without knowing anything about anything. Like, I'm sorry, did you think of like the cute little like pat on the ass you got from fucking Sam Cedar and from all the other little dipshit shows that you run around and you do a little spiel like, oh hey guys, I just want to talk about all the headlines that I read and it's real bad, right? Yeah, real bad. Yeah, I love the First Nations people, like, oh yeah, bro, like, oh yeah, the Cherokee, oh yeah, dude, all of those guys, I love them, right? Canadian, I think, right? Yeah, I love that shit, bro. Yeah, it's so horrible, right, bro? Yeah, like you really haven't read a single fucking thing about anything you're talking about. You actually came into this debate so fucking unprepared that you didn't know anything about the first mass burial site that was found. You didn't know anything about the 96 school or the court case that went against that school for the child that was trying to claim that it was a residential school student. You didn't know anything about any of this. You don't know how the ground penetrating radar scans work at all. You don't know anything about any of the statements the First Nations people have made about any of these burial sites. You don't know the year that Dr. Bryce report was reported that you keep citing over and over again like it's still relevant. Like you got those 1,600 kids who represented the 150,000 and the entire, like, how do you know a single fucking thing about this? You don't know anything about this conversation. What the fuck? What's he doing here? Lance has found himself in the nightmare scenario where you wake up and you're like, oh my god, I have a fucking report due today for my fucking history class, and then you remember, oh wait, I'm fucking 29. I graduated 7 years ago. What the fuck? Like he's actually that. He's doing that right now. Holy shit.
Thank you. So, you said no facts were given. But basically what I would say is Lauren and I have come at you with a bunch of descriptive facts, and not only that, they fit a shitload of your narrative. We've already said that there's probably a few thousand students that died in the residential school system. As a matter of fact, the current official estimate from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission puts it about 4,300, okay? Based off of the narratives collaborated, or whatever the fuck the word is, at the Truth and Reconciliation, it was largely poor conditions, disease, abuse, exposure, and fire. Those are the majority of the things. The primary contention that I've had historically in this entire conversation is whether or not we should use the term mass graves, which I get is
the rabbit guy privated his Twitter. These guys are unreal, dude. These guys are actually unfucking believable.
A little bit pedantic for Tale of Two Rabbits or whatever, but at the same time, when somebody says mass graves to me, I'm assuming marching a bunch of children out into the fucking woods and executing them and then shoving them into a ditch and then throwing fucking dirt on them. And as I've already conceded, if that was reality, then I would be doing some fucked up shit right about now. Okay? And it's not that any of this is not awful, but there's a spectrum of fucking awful. So whenever I'm trying to be accurate descriptively and I'm presenting these facts to you, these facts that are like agreed upon by the people who support your narrative, the reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want people to go out there and say there are mass graves in Canada. There's 4,000 kids that were discovered, and basically
Wait, what? Why did Lauren do this? Lauren's lost in the debate. We went to Family versus Lauren. She canceled and asked for a 2v2. I don't know this turn. I asked her. Or we'll see what she says. But like, even if she did, so I'm trying to think of her position. It might be better. So I'm still looking at the meta optics of this. I think if I was in Lauren's position, I think I probably would do that. Just because everybody's just gonna call you a Nazi anyway. But the problem that I would have with this is, in terms of believing Lance, is Lance already lied one time about trying to. Lance already lied one time about setting this debate up. Begging for debates. So I think Lauren's original tweet here was something about how like Lance has been begging for a debate for a long time. He's like, begging for debates? We've never actually spoken before. This was set up through a third party who asked me if I debate you. Already lying this hasn't even taken place. And she says, a third party? The dude said he fucking works for you as your booker. What do you want about? I don't have a booker. I mean, I'll talk to him now about whatever he's saying publicly. And she said, I even asked him to provide proof that he worked for you before he even considered the debate, which he did. So he showed that he was like a moderator of his Discord or some shit, which he did. And repeatedly manages getting in contact with personalities for you. I can certainly post screenshots publicly, but I'll let you chat to him first. He's a nice guy. I'm not claiming, now look at this. I'm not claiming we haven't worked together. He asked me if I'd be interested because he has your contact after he reached out to you. He's not my booker, as I don't have one before. But again, I'll talk to him about the statement that you were begged as that's false. And the funny thing is that somebody else comes down here and they even link a video of I think Dylan saying that Lance has been asking her for a debate.
The first thing I would like to say about this is this wasn't even my idea. And I'm not doing that to move blame, but I just want to describe the process that went into scheduling this. So Lance has been trying to schedule this event for a long period of time. He wanted to talk to Lauren Southern specifically about issues like retributive justice and vigilante justice, and if Canada is, of course, guilty of the accusation of genocide. Now, he has been trying to get this for a while, and has scheduled this a few times. The first
so, like, I mean, yeah. So maybe, like, yeah, a lot of miscommunication over in the Lance factory, I guess. I'm just curious, I asked Lauren or whatever. So she said, no, it's the guy who claims he's not his booker. He begged me multiple times, and I responded saying that I'll only do the debate if it's a 2-on-2.
The Canadian government has been committing genocide. Oh shit, that sounds fucking awful. That sounds like the fucking Canadian mountain police walked a bunch of kids out of the woods and shot them in the back of the head and threw them in shallow ditches. That's what people think when you say that shit. So when I'm being descriptive and I'm being pedantic and I'm trying to boil out these fucking definitions, it's because when people say that shit, they have emotional and mental and logical justification to go throw Molotov cocktails at shit. But when you say instead that there were horrific conditions, the Canadian government committed cultural genocide, it was not addressed up until like 1996. On top of that, there's systemic issues that extend into the modern day that are unaddressed, that Canadians only seem willing to reconcile with right now. That's a massively different narrative. Now, maybe the anger still needs to be there, maybe the passion still needs to be there, maybe the reformation still needs to be there, but at the same time, it's not the same as mass execution of children. So that's where
Connor's done a really good job at bringing it back to this point multiple times. I'm glad that he's done it. I don't know in the audience's eyes if they can see that this point is being brought back to when he evaded multiple times. He's done a good job centering it around this.
I'm being pedantic and annoying.
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to address that directly. So you've already acknowledged that under the conditions of the residential school system, every single death that occurs is because they are, again, wards of the state, right? So it doesn't matter if they're dying from tuberculosis, it doesn't matter if they're dying from malnutrition, starvation, they're still deaths that are the responsibility of the provincial federal government, correct?
Okay, what I would say is, while not necessarily biting that bullet in full, I do think that it is their responsibility, and it is their wrong. So I'm not trying to split hairs here, I'm trying to be very specific. Some of these things are not controllable, okay? Fires, tuberculosis, all that stuff, some of that stuff isn't controllable. But at the same time, there's something called liability, which means responsibility. The government was in charge of these people. The Native Americans whose children were forcibly taken by the government lost something that is very important to them. There's nothing more important.
I'm just going to counter this guy's point right now because I already know Lance isn't, because he doesn't know anything at all about this topic, but the easy layup here is to say, actually, some of these things were controllable. Things like fire, and especially tuberculosis. Like, your chance of surviving this disease can almost be directly tied into the amount of funding for your school. Because you don't have much money, kids are being housed together in like very close dorms and very close bunks. Part of that Dr. Bryce report that Lance was quoting earlier, he probably hasn't read it, and we skimmed it on stream, but even in Dr. Bryce's report, he was saying these schools are breeding grounds for tuberculosis in ways that normal Canadian schools aren't. That's why there's like a 50 times higher mortality rate for Indigenous children. So things like tuberculosis were actually within like the control of the Canadian government if they had more funding for these schools. Lance probably doesn't know anything about this, so he won't give that counter, but that would be one way to counter what Connor is saying right now.
In this world than my son, okay? So since the Canadian government took children and either accidentally or negligently killed them, they owe the families whose children were killed something. Whether that's restorative justice, systemic change, all that kind of bullshit. We can talk about that in the next segment.
Yeah, sure. So it seems to me like it's just a point of disgust that you want to reach, right? So for you, it would be...
He doesn't even know. He actually has no idea what he's doing in this conversation. How much longer does this go on for? How much longer does it suffer? Is this really going on for another hour? This is like unreal, dude.
Egregious and beyond the pale. If the children were taken out into the back of the woods and they were shot in the face, that to you is like, okay, that justifies me burning down a church, apparently. Whereas I would say that in this condition, the things that happen, when the statistics show 1 in 5 of the children is sexually molested, that to me is horrifying enough in and of itself to not even have to bring up the other things. Again, those things include experimentation.
Wait, horrifying enough to what? Am I missing this or what? Is he making it sound like the church burnings are justified? I need to go back and listen to this again. I'm sorry.
The woods and they were shot in the face. That to you is like, okay, that justifies me burning down a church, apparently. Whereas I would say that in this condition, the things that happen, when the statistics show 1 in 5 of the children is sexually molested, that to me is horrifying enough in and of itself to not even have to bring up the other things. Again, those things include experimentation. Those things include torture. Those things include physical and sexual abuse. All of which to me are beyond the pale. So it doesn't matter to me whether or not we're going to quantify this in this kind of strange scale of eyeballs, right? Which is more horrifying. Are they shot in the face or are they all just sexually molested by priests? Either way, again, as wards of the state, the Canadian government, the Catholic Church were responsible for
I don't know if he knows this or not. Can somebody tell me where the association with the Catholic Church comes from? There were like 4 or 5 different denominations that ran these churches. Why is he only mentioning the Catholic ones? I don't know why he keeps verbalizing Catholic. It wasn't just the Catholic Church that ran. There were other denominations that ran these schools as well. Or actually, if I could ask, does anybody in chat happen to have a link that breaks down like this is the number of churches or the number of residential schools ran by each type of church? Yeah, Presbyterians, evangelicals. There was one other one that was listed as well. There was also, funnily enough, I think, including the Bryce report, the Dr. Bryce report.
Seeing their safety, they failed horrifyingly at that.
Okay, but descriptively, I know where you want to go, but I'm very excited. So basically, descriptively, this actually very closely parallels onto the BLM riots of the previous year, okay? I can understand descriptively why riots are occurring. Systemic injustice, over-policing, the drug war, like all that kind of stuff. I can understand descriptively why these things are happening while not thinking that they're necessarily morally justifiable. So that's the same parallel that I would exactly draw to this thing, where I can understand that if your uncle or something like that was part of the residential school system, he was sexually abused, and then a story comes out saying that there's mass graves in Catholic churches, and there's a Catholic church up the block, and you're either leftist who's sympathizing with Native Americans, or you're a Native American person yourself, why you would commit vandalism. I understand that descriptively, but I also think that it's based on some shittily communicated information, and that doesn't make it morally just, which I'm very happy to explore in the next segment, because basically once we get into the details of the next segment, I think you're going to kind of see why the reaction to this stuff is also fucked up.
Yeah, but see, I'm not here arguing in favor of people destroying churches. I'm not here arguing even if they were the victims. Like, I can understand why it's justifiable, but I'm not saying that that is a fair course of action to be taking. I'm not here to justify people destroying churches. I mean, if that's where we're going to move, that's fine. I would start by saying at this time, we do not know who is burning the churches down.
Okay, I wanted to throw it over to Lauren because Lauren's going to win a little bit, then I'll throw it over to Tail afterwards.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question for you, Lance, is whether you think these church burnings are justified, because I made a video on the church burnings, and you obviously responded with a long response where you claimed that my video condemning the church burnings was further victimizing the Indigenous community because I was blaming them for it, something I never asserted once in my entire video, so, it may have been easy to debate a straw man version of me, but now I'm actually here. I actually think it's a lot of progressives doing it, and we can't say we don't know who are doing these burnings when people are literally signing off with activist messages or spray painting and graffiti and activist messages. These are clearly progressive activists that have been inspired by the highly exaggerated talk of mass graves, which some of which, like ones found in Kelowna, in BC anyways, were just graveyards that were overgrown but called mass graves. So we know these are activists, we know they're being invigorated by false and exaggerated news. Do you condemn that? And do you condemn the church burnings and attacks in general?
Yeah,
okay, so that was a direct question to Lance. I'm going to let Lance respond, but then I want to go to Tail.
Okay, so first off, that was absolutely fascinating because you contradicted yourself mid-sentence, so that was something to behold. You just stated at the very beginning that, like, I'm not going to assert who's causing this, there's just no way of knowing. I wouldn't do that. Well, at the same time, mid-sentence...
That's not what she said. She said that she didn't assert that Indigenous people did it. Did I mishear that? Wait, I thought she said I didn't claim that Indigenous people did it. Not that I couldn't possibly know who did it. Is he even listening to it? Lance, if you're listening, write down fucking notes on your notepad when you do these debates. Clearly your mind, you just have no short-term memory, so fucking write shit down.
But we do know who's doing this because there are signs and activists committing these crimes and atrocities. Still, even if you have signs and even if you have revelations, excuse me, I'm speaking, we're going to finish this. Even if you do have signs, even if you do say that, yes, at the end of the day, this must be Antifa or this must be an Indigenous community who's doing it, we would still need to have direct evidence of that. We would still need to have individuals who are arrested.
Do you think, I wish I could try to think of properly, do you think he would ever accept that same standard of evidence? If some white guy with like walked into a mall and started shooting and killing like black people and Muslims, you think he'd be like, whoa, we don't know if this is conservative. We need to wait a minute for more evidence to come out. Get fucking real, dude.
Still need to have testimonies. We would still
like, it's crazy that like we just finally got to this point where everybody's calling this shit genocidal. No, all of a sudden we got fucking 20, 30 churches burning down. Like, could be anybody, you know? Who the fuck knows? Who the fuck knows?
To have a single like criminal conviction in this regard. And when it comes to these schools, these Catholic churches burning down, yes, I do condemn them. I'm not here to defend people burning down religious institutions. That's not what I'm here to defend.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it over to Tail, and that was directed at Lauren, so we'll bring it back.
What fucking random ass smug answer is Tail gonna try to utter here without actually? We all okay?
Tail, and that was directed at Lauren, so we'll bring it back to Lauren.
Well, I do also find it interesting that we keep trying to move this definition of what was an acceptable level of death, like whether or not the fires at these residential schools can be attributable to some sort of nefarious intent. And my answer to that would be, well, maybe if they hadn't had the removal policy in the first place, then those kids wouldn't have died in those fires.
I'm sorry, but this kind of goes along with the article the other day. Like, there is some acceptable level of death. Like, I'm sorry, but death is never going to be zero, right? Even in the best systems in the world, I'm willing to bet that there are probably kids that die because like something breaks down, or some roof collapses, or some fire happens, or some electrical outlet malfunctions. Like, I'm sure that this happens like all over the fucking world. Like, shit happens. It sucks, right? So there's going to be some level of death. Like, that's always going to happen, right? Like, we get it. Like, dying is bad, but like.
but it is a curiosity to me that we do keep talking about these church fires. The church fires have been happening since long before the information came out about these kids. I mean, for example, in November 1st of 2020, there were two Southwestern Ontario churches that were roughly 10 minutes apart. They were both set on fire. There was a series of arsons that were attributable to a man who was apparently arrested over COVID violations just the week before the news was released. That was, by the way, attributed by Rebel News to cultural Marxists who were trying to rebel against mass regulations. So what is it we're talking about right now? I'm not in favor of church burnings. I think it's bad because it tends to destroy the records of these kids who were murdered and tortured. I think it's a bad idea overall, but I'm not seeing any evidence whatsoever that it somehow sprang fully formed from the forehead of Antifa 5 minutes after they found out that something was amiss at the residential schools. People have known what was going on with the residential schools for years. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out in 2016. So we had plenty of time to process this information. Why are we suddenly worried about all of these church burnings?
Because I don't think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is what's kicked off all the recent discourse. It was the discovery of the quote-unquote mass grave.
Been happening for quite a while now.
Well, by the way, this wasn't a secret to indigenous communities. Like, this was one of the things where it was a revelation to Canadians.
Lance, I said that Lauren would be next. I'll get back over you, but I want to be fair. Lauren?
Yeah, even the mainstream media, even if you go look at the most leftist sources, they're not denying that there's a link between these church burnings and the recent reports. Why? Because the media headlines, even the Prime Minister, are talking about these mass graves, which the media are asserting and exaggerating are mass graves, and that's why this whole previous conversation was important. Of course it's linked. When you have 12 churches being attacked one night after a mass media storm about mass indigenous graves, and the churches have writing on them that say save indigenous children, the idea that you could assert this has no link, and that's just random church burnings, I think is very, very silly. And Connor, I see you're putting your hand up there.
I see. On Hippy Dippy, we usually have a hand raising rule, so I think I've kind of like done it
we've all been doing
dogs, you know?
That's right, I'm not.
Why is this stupid? He's trying to ask us why would you be on a show and say that all of us have been raising our hand to talk when your partner doesn't have a fucking camera on? Lance, what's wrong with you, Lance? You're losing it.
So it's like what's a Pavlov? You know how Pavlov like made the dogs like twitch or did a certain thing. It's kind of like that. So that's why I raised his hand. We're gonna go to Lance first and then Connor, since Lance was trying to speak earlier. Lance.
Yeah, I'm just gonna quickly say that there has been numerous indigenous chiefs as well as band members who have come out and emphatically condemned the church burnings. They've also stated that these churches were an integral parts of the community. So I think to lay blame on any one person, especially again before we understand who's done it, historically it has all been proven to be a very dangerous practice. So in the event that an individual in this case is arrested, in the event that we have a testimony, in the event that we find out that it happens to be the dreaded communists or Antifa, in which case yes, I will acquiesce and gladly say, well, now we have reason to say that this is the reason why this occurred. Again, I'd like to say emphatically that this was not news to indigenous communities. This was not a new revelation. They have known for generations. The majority of the families of the children who had
Lauren didn't say it was indigenous people that were doing the crimes. You're attacking strongmen. Like,
died in residential schools were told by those schools that their children ran away. That was like, if you listen to the testimony of the people who experienced this, in the vast majority of those cases, those kids, if they did run away, which sometimes they were just killed in school themselves, they would have died on the journey. Many of them drowned, many of them froze. So it's not a case of all of a sudden this has opened up a secret. What this did do was this did reveal everything to Canadians. Polls came out afterwards that 2/3 of Canadians had no idea about residential schools before any of this occurred. And yes, I think that is a good thing that they've learned about this entire horrifying part of our history. But that doesn't mean at that same time you can simply state that the blame of this was going to be laid on any person.
Okay.
Hey, Connor?
Thank you. And part of the reason why I keep raising my hands is because you keep ringing the dinner bell and you keep taking away my fucking dog bowl, all right? So, goddamn. So, okay, I hate asking questions in debates because I'm not trying to fucking gotcha you. But if we were just trying to logically think about it, as far as factional groups within Canada, okay, we have the conservative Canadians. They're probably not doing it. I think that's safe to say, especially if they're Christian. We have, maybe we have Satanists. Maybe all the Satanists have gotten on like a Reddit forum and they're just like, fuck churches, all specifically right now. Fuck churches, right? Maybe that happened. Who fucking knows, right? Somebody go check 4chan. But the fucking lines that I'm drawing here seem very straightforward. That upsetting news about the residential school system has been released and been the focus of media attention for at least the last couple of years. That's why we're talking about it right now, because it's relevant. Regardless of whether or not it's pissed off indigenous folk or people who sympathize with them, is kind of a moot point. But I think here to be like, you have to find evidence that this is the prime motivator. Why? Who else would be doing it besides people who saw the news, got pissed off, and decided they wanted to do something about it? I'm not talking about whether it's good or bad. I'm just saying, why are we trying to play hide the ball here about who's doing what and why?
Because I'm not stating that we have to ignore what the prime motivator would be. I'm sure you can make that assertion. I'm saying that we cannot claim or lay blame on any one group until we found out who exactly is doing it. You can state, here's why I think this is the reason why it is. But I think it's been very dangerous. People are going to attribute to this to say, like, I've heard online that a lot of people consider this to be indigenous activists, right? That they were burning these churches out of anger and malice. I've heard a lot of people suggest that it may be, as you both have, far leftist groups who are doing the exact same thing. You can attribute who you think the blame may lay at, but until we know who has done it, I don't think we can definitively say or claim in this debate, here's who's the responsible party and here's why you have contributed, or the leftists have contributed, or the media has contributed.
This is so unbelievable to me. Like, it's obvious. If you say somebody's genociding people over and over and over again, and then people take up like arms, start arsoning buildings and shit, it's pretty fucking obvious what's gonna happen. That should be a given. Like, come on.
Towards an atmosphere that resulted in these churches being burned down.
Sure, and actually I want to address this head on because this kind of gets into justice, right? So for me, the same way that you're asking that, like, hey, left-wing groups, it could be some individuals in the left-wing groups that are doing this, but left-wing groups in general probably aren't doing this as a policy. And as a matter of fact, there's people in left-wing groups and indigenous circles that are actually discouraging these behaviors, and they're not trying to encourage them. They're actually saying, this is fucked up, please stop. It's
the vast majority of bands and chiefs have come out and spoken against it.
Awesome. So when we move this conversation into justice, basically what I would assert is that this is where I would want to see justice meted out. So on a, I don't want to say an individual level, but almost on an individual level. So for instance, you're talking about priests that did the molestation. They should be investigated, prosecuted, and convicted, right? Whether maybe the church should consider paying restitution to people who are proven to be victims or some shit like that, okay? Maybe the government should try to address systemic issues in order to help people out, okay? Especially people who are specifically affected by these issues. I think that's all well and good. What we're trying to avoid here, actually very specifically through this conversation, or at least what my goal would be, is avoiding a cultural, ethnic, linguistic, and religious civil war in our liberal democracy. And the thing is, Canada's reckoning with this right now. America's not even fucking close to reckoning with any of this shit. Whether we're talking about Native American affairs, slavery, like any of that kind of shit, we're not even close to starting to describe to each other the actual historical wrongs that we have done to each other. So I want to get into this in a second, but I understand that you guys have asserted repeatedly that there's an ongoing genocide. I would probably contend with that definition, but you can say that there's systemic issues or whatever, but I would see the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which we have stats on all the initiatives that they have started already. I would actually see that as the fucking gold standard of like transparency. Like, it's actually incredible what they've done. Now, is it completely accurate? Maybe not. Is everything productive? Probably not. But as far as like actually going to the root of the problem, coming up with descriptors, coming up with policy, and then trying to implement it, it's fucking amazing. So I'm happy to get into that in a second.
Yeah, I'm actually just genuinely surprised with that response because we've just been throwing all these spicy shots. But like, I agree with most of what you said. I think it's
What Connor's been giving around this whole debate. What do you mean you're surprised? Like,
actually a very constructive way of dealing with this problem. At the end of the day, what has upset me most, especially with Lauren's video, is that I think this idea of suddenly talking about the moral outrage at the church burnings, which I agree, burning of religious institutions is something to be astounded at, is trying to change the narrative from something that is an ongoing crisis in this country, which is the treatment of hundreds of thousands of indigenous people. And that is the thing that we should be talking about. That is the thing we should be concentrating on, and that is the thing we should be addressing. So I think that yes, it is horrifying that churches are burning down, but I don't want anyone to lose the concentration that things like discovering of dead children, buried children, indigenous residential schools. If this is where suddenly the public conscience has come, and this is what we're talking about, then let's utilize this as an opportunity to start talking about the issues of cultural genocide that are occurring to indigenous people today.
Okay, I'm in response since you talked about my video. Lance, I watched your video and you actually liked the beginning of my video because I did not ignore the problems that happened in residential schools. I discussed them. You liked that aspect. Where you didn't like it was when I started talking about the church burnings. And these are not, these problems cannot just exist. You can talk about both problems. Why not? And we need to, because we actually have an injustice happening today that we can talk about and deal with and stop. And then the other ones, I mean, you say there's injustice happening today and the government are working on that. There are a lot of policies they put in place for healing, and maybe there are more we can discuss. But these church burnings are a problem happening right now, and I think it's really good that people are talking about them, especially when they bring in the conversation of the problems with residential schools as well. I cannot see what I've done wrong in discussing that. I also really want to point something out. When it comes to the church burnings, you seem really interested in ensuring we have found the culprits and ensuring we have proper convictions.
True.
Yet when it comes to the Catholic Church, you were just saying we should be outing the names of people who have been accused, not convicted. So why does your passion for justice and innocent until proven guilty exist for the church burnings, but not for the Catholic Church?
Sure. So that's not what I said. What I said was that should they release the records of the individuals who were involved in these churches, and whether or not those records
You
would
said
show. Yeah, I said as in the records revolving around both the nuns and the priests who worked at those churches, those were records that the Catholic Church has not released. Whether or not those people turn out to be pedophiles is something that we can investigate, and whether or not those people will turn out to be criminals is another thing that we can talk about. The reason why I don't enjoy your particular brand of like pearl clutching when it comes to talking about these issues is that yes, you did a half decent job at acknowledging, which I was surprised to see, the residential school system and the treatment of indigenous people. When you twist things around and then you take this as an opportunity to say, and now we need to talk about the real issue, which happens to be these Catholic churches that are burning down, you are then trying to take away from the national conversation, which
oh my god,
should be about the treatment of indigenous people. If I was to compare the treatment of Catholics in Canada to the treatment of indigenous Canadians, where do you think they would stack up? If I was to compare the treatment of the average white Catholic Canadian to the experience of the average indigenous Canadian, where do you think we would end up? Who needs more help and who needs more concern right now in terms of the way they're being systemically oppressed between those two classes?
I wasn't comparing them. I was giving history and context as to why the outrage and conversation was happening in Canada, and then discussing how two wrongs don't make a right.
And that's the result of what you do. Because when you set those terms up, when you put them in that context, when you make those kind of videos, when you just ask questions, that's what ends up happening. And whether you're doing it consciously, I'm not sure. I don't know if you're doing it consciously or perhaps you're doing it unconsciously. I'm not sure, but that is the end result of your work. And when you make those kind of videos,
What is?
When you juxtapose two things like that, two opposing ideas, you set them up on the same terms. You make videos.
Literally one stems from the other. What the fuck is he talking about? Dude, how much longer is this? I don't know how much. This is so stupid. This might be one of the most one-sided conversations I've watched like in a long time. Holy shit! Like I don't even know what the fuck he's doing here. And then the other guy is just like completely and totally checked out because he's just like, fuck it, I don't have shit to say. Like
about them, and then suddenly it's going to be justifiable to think, well, the moral outrage should shift from this horrifying atrocity that has occurred and is still ongoing to indigenous Canadians into we should now talk about Catholic churches and bringing them down. That's
I think I can make
she should ask that question again. Can we not talk about both? She should just focus on that. Can we not talk about both?
But my audience have the ability to juggle two ideas at the same time. And I can explain past atrocities and then say, here's also present atrocity happening, and they can say, wow, those are both bad things. I don't know about your audience, but my audience can juggle two things at the same time.
And it's with design, because by doing that, I push that narrative, they will be forced then to look at that and be like, well, you know what, I was a little upset about what's happening to indigenous people, but I should be a lot more upset now at the Catholic churches that bring down. Because
we shouldn't talk about Catholic churches because it takes away from indigenous issues.
You can talk about Catholic churches, you should not juxtapose the two of them as if one is now going to be able to justify or accuse the other of being wrong.
Imagine if she made a video that only talked about Catholic churches burning down. Like, imagine him would be like, it's funny that you'll mention all of this about Catholic churches burning down, but you wouldn't even mention a single time why people are attacking them or what people are so upset about. Like, can you imagine the outrage she would have if she would only made a video covering just the churches burning down? Like, this is such a disingenuous line of attack.
That's not what I did though. So how should I have made my video? Because what I did was I said this is what happened at indigenous residential schools. This is why it was bad, not a good thing. And then also there's this non-great thing happening today, and both things are bad. And we need to talk about it because it's happening right now. How should I have done that video differently? I feel like you're nitpicking and trying to find a problem with me because you didn't actually have an issue with that video, which is why you made up your issue in response to 2000 names, which I never did. Otherwise you would have had an actual deep in your initial video.
Trying to answer that question quite easily. The information I find interesting, we just lost past the fact that these church burnings have actually been happening since long before the news was released. But in scouring through the information over the last probably 2 years trying to find church burnings causes, but another investigations, I found one that was particularly funny to me, which was it was a church that has burned in the same spot 3 separate times over the last 50 years, and it turned out that it was the area where priests heated incense and the anointing oil. Because for some reason, I don't know why, this particular priest is just not aware that he probably shouldn't have open flame and oil.
Wait, he's actually, this is like tantamount to Holocaust denialism. Is that really what he's doing right now? Is he gonna try to claim that like all of this is fake? That there aren't really any churches that are actually being burned down right now? I think the day after that first mass burial site, wasn't there like, literally like somebody looked in chat, there were like 4 that were burned down like that very first fucking day. Or like within a week or whatever I should say. There were like 4 Catholic churches burned down immediately. Like, when was the first ground penetration scan? What was the year? Or sorry, no, what was the month for that? You have to go through this list. I went through some of the arson or the vandalism on this kind of shit. But like this at the very least has like a timeline on like June 26th, July 2nd, June 26th, June 26th, June 28th, June 28th, July 10th, July 3rd, July 4th, June 28th, June 30th, July 9th, July 1st, July 8th. Are you telling me? And I could be wrong. I totally could be wrong. Were churches burning this often in Canada prior to this? Was this really that frequent in Canada?
And so this is the 5th time that the fire department has been called out. So I would like to see you discuss, for example, why is the Canadian churches seem to be exempt from fire codes or be aware that fire extinguishers have been invented?
Oh my god. This guy is actual human garbage. He's actually human trash. Now, will Lance... I'm just asking this rhetorically because I know he's not going to. Will Lance have a backbone here and say, well, hold on. I don't know if I agree with my friend here literally denying the fact that any of these churches have actually burned down, or is Lance just going to shut the fuck up?
That's fascinating, Tail. So your current assertion is that all the fucking churches that burned down in Canada over the past 2 years with accidental Catholic priests, on top of being fucking pedos and fucking Native American beers, are fucking dog shit, fucking fire safety. That's what you want to do in this fucking conversation right now?
I'm contributing to you the facts as they stand. If you have a problem with the facts as they stand.
I have problems with the fucking facts because you keep doing this meta conversation bullshit. It has fucking nothing to do with what's going on. So tell me, I'm frustrated with you. What the fuck did you just add to the conversation by saying that maybe Catholic priests are accidentally burning down their own churches? Is that a serious intention that we're not supposed to take on honestly? Do you think that we need to go back to fucking Google right now and be right like, hey, what's the fucking fire codes of the fucking Catholic? Do they have fucking fire safety priests or the priests? Like, what the fuck am I supposed to research for that information?
Are you asking me for
No, I'm not, because I think you're shitposting and you're being an asshole for no fucking reason. You're the fucking conversation though.
I'm identifying that church fires preceded any announcement of these graves. And your assertion repeatedly is that there is some sort of...
Laura should just read down that list. The one that I just like, she should just read it down. Wall Street Journal has a decent article on it. More Canadian churches burn in suspicious fire. Police in Canada are investigating more than 15 fires that have damaged or destroyed churches in recent weeks. But in most cases, they have yet to name suspects or offer an official motive to wave the suspect arson that is targeted. Wait, what do they mean by wave? No one is taking credit for the fires. The politicians and law enforcement officials have speculated that the churches are being targeted by those angry about the recent discovery of unmarked graves. The blazes destroyed 4 Roman Catholic churches and happened after an indigenous community set around 250 unmarked graves near a former boarding school for indigenous children in British Columbia. Only a few weeks later, the Coesis First Nation in the Western Canadian province of Saskatchewan found 751 unmarked graves. Since then, more churches have burned in the provinces of British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, but no one cares about your fucking province. In addition to the fires, churches began overnight on June 30th by vandals who smeared red and orange paint over their facades and scrawled numbers 215 and 751 on them. References to the numbers of graves found at 2 separate school sites. Like,
what? Connor, because I got lemon space, you won't find one.
Connor's so mad. I love him.
Connor, because I got lemon space, you won't find one. Okay, Tail, please finish.
I think Connor might need to take a break.
But you want to
I'm perfectly fine. I'm good. You may proceed. It's obviously very important to you.
How you doing?
See, thank you for the ding ding. So fucking, all right. So you said these church burnings happened in the past as well. If I was to Google church burnings and look at statistics, you haven't seen an increase over the past 2 years?
I have no idea.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Oh my god, this guy is actually so unbelievably bad faith. Connor, if I can aim you, I don't even blame you, dude. I truly don't blame you. Like, he does a disservice to everything he wants to argue about up here. Like, he is more damaging to indigenous people than any crazy far-right fucking activist. Like, the representation here is astoundingly fucking horrible. I cannot believe these two dipshits waddled into this debate with no facts, figures, understanding anything being discussed, and thought they were equipped to have this conversation. Unbelievable, dude. I'm sorry, I feel like I said this 30 times.
What's the problem? And come on, you don't have to be condescending in every single response you do. Tail. Come on. I mean,
What do you mean? Tayl's been condescending in every single response he's given this entire debate. Are you fucking serious?
You have to say something real.
I did, Connor. I said something real.
Okay, you said that Catholic priests are burning down their own churches by being assholes and putting incense in the wrong spot. That's right. Is that your real contribution to this conversation?
If you have a problem with that fact, it is your problem to have.
Okay, I have a problem with that fact.
Well, then that's your problem to have.
Okay.
Question: Are Catholic priests also putting paint on the front of their churches and adding statues paint that says "Fight for X progressive cause"? I've recently seen the source tweeting out stuff that says we are indigenous children. Are Catholic priests putting up on their church walls? Are they the ones doing that graffiti? That's been an exponential growth the last few months.
I'm more than willing to acknowledge that there's plenty of things that have been happening over the last 3 or 5 or 10 years that can be charted in any number of conceivable ways. But you haven't actually addressed what I said, which was these fires preceded the news.
Okay. Here, let me break this down for you. I was a former law enforcement officer, okay? We investigate things. When something picks up in a certain pattern, let's say there's like one burglary in one area, and then it's just one burglary in the house. Okay, well, burglary happens, you try to investigate it, if you don't figure it out, then okay, whatever. If 20 burglaries occur in the same area within a month, there's probably a reason for it, so you can investigate it. And what I'm doing right now is I'm doing 1 + 1 = 2, and you're saying 1 is maybe a 0.5, so maybe it doesn't equal 2. And I have no idea what that's the conversation, because we're literally light years ahead of where
Well, it does not add much of a conversation. Can we get back just out away from the fire incident there?
Sure, can I would like to ask questions first because I'm pretty dedicated, I'm getting attention.
I'm going to concede that fires happen before these fires happen now.
No, you shouldn't give a fucking centimeter of ground on that point. You shouldn't give anything to that. Like, this is the equivalent. This rabbit guy is basically making the equivalent argument to like a Holocaust. Come on, everybody did bad things in World War II. Like, he's making the equivalent to that argument. Like, it's actually so absurd.
But assault rate existed before residential schools, so you never know. All right, Claire, go ahead.
No, I can understand. Yes, yeah, no, but again, assault rape existed for residential schools, but these were forced upon the children. That's a huge difference. Again, the same thing Cameron points out, right? You said there's rape existed everywhere in society. If you're forcing children to be in institutions where 1 in 5 of them is getting sexually assaulted, then that is on you. That's on the Catholic Church. That's on the government.
Sure. Okay, so let's move the conversation forward because I'm looking forward to my instance. So basically, what you're talking about, one of the major contentions that we were having was whether or not the current actions of the Canadian government or the actions since 1996 constituted genocide. I watched your debate with Destiny. I liked it. I was interesting. Maybe it was Vanders. I'm sorry if I misreading that. Yeah, it was Vanders. But the thing that I found most compelling was that like, I felt like a lot of the issues that were brought up while trying to support the term of genocide with evidence were paralleled in the American system with Black Americans, right? And so what I would say from a progressive lens, most people wouldn't say that the United States government is trying to genocide Black Americans. They would say that there's systemic issues that disproportionately affect Black communities for remote or
I don't know if he got this point from me, but this is exactly what I would say, right? If we're going by the new Canadian version of genocide, literally everybody's committing genocide against all the minority populations right now. Like,
but I think only a few people would use genocide. You seem pretty confident in your assertion of the word genocide, so I would like to get your description and your evidence and maybe push back against it a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so for the articles of genocide from the UN Convention, right? I'm pretty sure we all agree on Article E. First, we transfer children from one group to another group. That's what the Canadian government is involved with since the start of schools. I believe that they kind of fall in the most equal cost and serious body in the arms of the group, so leaving 15 on group conditions like conditions like construction or apart. Both measures that burst within the group. The one that I'm sure we all went on and agreed that Canada was leading the forced transfer children from one group to another, right?
Sure, but so let's say one doesn't have to make sense, make sense. So let's say that there was a system to culturally genocide Native Canadians, Native Americans in Canada. But let's just say that even if it was considerably muted, it extended until 1996. What about today? What about after 1996?
Sure.
Do you think constitutes genocide on behalf of the Canadian government?
Sure. So what occurred independently of the residential schools in Canada was something known as the 60 Scoop, which took place in about I believe 1967 onward, in which 20,000 Indigenous children were taken from their families and they were actually carted into buses and they were sold to families in both the UK and the US, which also would constitute child trafficking. They were sold in forms.
This is in the 60s, the 60 Scoop. We're looking for something a little more modern, but I'm sure we'll get there. We got to run down our talking points.
Terms for adoption. They were sold and they were often placed within white families and once again lost their Indigenous culture and all that stuff. Many of the 60 Scoop children have grown up and they come back to other stories. There's multiple survivors of this event and they come forward and say that yes, I was sold into adoption in the Canadian government. That's bad. What is more important is that today we have a system in which the federal government of Canada, this is really something that's a key line, they are the ones that oversee all public services on reserves for First Nations children as well as First Nations education. That falls under the purview of the federal government. So they are the ones who have to fund the conditions necessary for child welfare. Now, if you want to take away all the history of reservations in Canada and if you know already the reserve system in Canada, which was trying to take law into Indian, basically took and takes a whole bunch of Indigenous cultures and put them into small spaces with horrible conditions, oftentimes far away from places that were remote, they were away from Canadian society, they had a lot of difficulty work on stuff because of Indigenous. Maybe we want to resolve that. And we take it forward today. We live in a system now where we have an unbelievably high rate of Indigenous children in the foster care system. 50% of all kids in the Canadian foster care system are Indigenous, despite being about 3% of the Canadian population. In Alberta, it's 70%, in Manitoba, it's 85%, in Saskatchewan, it's 87%. Now, just for comparison, Canada has 1.1% of children in foster care compared to Germany, which has 0.07%. Now, 2/3 of all the girls in foster care are abused, which is unfortunately horrible. Children in foster care system, if you're Indigenous, are 4 times more likely to be sexually molested than if not. And it continues to permeate 60% of homeless youth, 1/3 of homeless adults were in child care foster system, 91% of Indigenous female prisoners were sexually abused.
Okay, sorry, I don't know if I can finish this. This is actually just so fucking stupid. We have to prove genocide, not just like systemic injustice because of lack of funding. Is there an intentional part of the Canadian system to try to like abuse all these children? That's what you need to prove, right?
We make now 3% of prisoners in Canada. The majority of them were in the foster care system. Indigenous children make 50% of living in correctional facilities. I could go on all these ways to permeate, but the difference would be, and this is one of the most comparable things I would say someone wants to compare this to say the Black American experience, is that these reserve systems were set up by the government of Canada. These reserve systems were set up in China by the government of Canada. And so they set the conditions which they would have to support and enable children in these conditions in order to be able to assure their welfare. What ended up happening, and this is the reason why this is a huge problem, is they began to underfund these systems. They have underfunded them by about 30% in comparing to their non-Indigenous counterparts. In the case of Ontario, they underfunded them by about $400 million over the course of 5 years. So they're intentionally underfunding these systems.
Intentionally, or it's like politically unpopular to fund them? What do you mean by intentionally?
Then creating the poverty that's necessary for these kids to be justified to take from their parents in these systems.
Okay, so just to understand this descriptively, so I can try to understand your argument. So your argument is that we're only a generation away from the residential system. The systemic issues that are basically inherent in the residential system, basically like lack of resources, lack of education, infrastructure, all that stuff. That causes broken families. Broken families are then contributing disproportionately to the foster care system, and then the foster care system is basically cyclical because they're producing adults that then in turn produce cycle. And then my question is, because basically I think a lot of these arguments, while still fucked up, are analogous to our own perception of our foster care system inside the United States. The question I have is, are you saying it's genocide because then it fits under that UN subsection where it's the forcible removal of children? It's kind of like this multivariable.
It doesn't fit under the UN subsection. That's why Canada Canada themselves and made their own new definition because they wanted to remove that intentionality aspect out of it. But if you remove the intentionality part, then arguably almost any form of systemic injustice becomes a genocide, which is why it's so stupid to do that.
Cycle that you're seeing, is that what you're calling genocide, or is there another reason?
Okay, so for me to take the assertion that this is still continuous ongoing genocide, I would have to use the reference again that we speak about the reconciliation commission multiple times. There's also the murder of indigenous women report that came out that started the exact same thing, as well as the UN Human Rights Council that said that this is an ongoing crisis that amounts to genocide. Amnesty International has come out with the same terms in no certain words. It's not simply that they are intentionally, because they are intentionally underfunding these programs and then creating this revolving system. They are also specifically adopting indigenous children at a higher rate despite the numbers. So if I have to compare indigenous children to non-indigenous children and the rates and the reasons why they're adopted for the adoption program, if you really look at every single metric, non-indigenous parents commit other atrocities such as physical abuse at a much higher rate than non-indigenous parents. So for non-indigenous parents, physical abuse occurs 23% of cases in cases. Indigenous families 29%. The same thing for sexual abuse, emotional maltreatment, exposure to violence. All of across the board are either equal to or higher than non-indigenous families. The exception to the rule, and the only reason why indigenous kids are apparently taken from families at a much higher rate, is neglect. And neglect only registers at 16 points higher than non-indigenous kids. So one of the biggest problems we have here is neglect as a broad term for being able to take these children away from their families is typically for a handful of reasons related to the living conditions. The living conditions, which again are under the purview, especially with child welfare, of the federal government of Canada, who is intentionally paying them much lower rates than they are other families. They are creating conditions in which this is occurring. Now this, by the way, is not in and of itself. I wouldn't just walk away with this idea, chips, my drop, you know, and then I fucking got it. This is again one of the many things that be characterized in, say, if we were to look at the Reconciliation Report or any of the other reports that come out in the World Commission of 1996. This is one of the biggest critical factors. If you look at the Reconciliation Commission, which has stated that this is a genocide and that it is ongoing, they set out a whole bunch of calls to action specifically to address the fact that this is something that is ongoing and we need to stop this. And like you said, it was groundbreaking. I completely agree. I mean, it started in 2008 because the lawsuit cost $100 million, but their findings are critical. And the top numbers, if you read all calls to action to the Reconciliation Commission, the top numbers all talk about child welfare. They're the most important things to them because they are the ones that are critical for this ongoing process.
All right.
Uh-oh. Is this going to be about all the work that's been going on all the recommendations?
So you were just mentioning really rapidly that within indigenous families, at least in adoption, that the rates of abuse are lower, correct?
It depends on which categories. But for nearly every single category, for non-Aboriginal children, for physical abuse it's higher, for sexual abuse it's higher, for emotional maltreatment it's the same, and for exposure to intimate partner violence it's higher, all for non-Aboriginal families. The only case in which First Nations children are higher is neglect.
Okay, so first of all, I want to agree with you that the foster system is deeply messed up. You know, I've had a family that experienced it, even as non-indigenous, and almost died in it, right? It's a messed up system. It needs help in all regards. If there is other funding for indigenous children in the system, that's something I absolutely support fixing. Now, is there a disparity, and you may have data on this, is there a disparity in the amount of indigenous kids versus non-indigenous kids that are removed from their homes in the first place?
Yeah, it's overwhelmingly indigenous kids.
Okay, so like I read the CDC, right, go online, and you can see, and I mean, you can agree with this if you want, they'll talk about how there's higher drug use in these communities, higher incest and rape, you know, neglect, these things in general, and this is not talking about just the foster care families, this is talking about the general population, and they say that is because of the legacy of residential school and things they were taught while they were there, perhaps, but wouldn't it follow that if these things are happening in the community, that is why more kids are being put in the foster system, and I just, does that follow you?
Yeah, so what you're trying to do is lay blame directly on the experience of the
No, I'm just trying to sort out why this is happening, so we can have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Just have to, in this case, it would be...
He tries to meme so hard. Oh my god, dude.
The overwhelming reason why they're being taken from families involved in neglect. Now, neglect can include parents who are using drugs, neglect can include that. There's a number of reasons why they're being taken from families. In terms of conditions on these reserves, and in terms of conditions as to why they're, like, you gotta understand these are deplorable environments. And yes, a lot of these people came back from the school system, and this permeated the cycle of abuse, but these are also areas, there's 54 reserves, and this falls again in the government of Canada, that don't have drinking water. They don't have potable drinking water. Like, the very essence of life, and I'm not trying to be emotional or anything, I'm trying to emotion, but I'm saying that that's a critical aspect of living in these environments, and that's why this may perpetuate create conditions in which we'll find families who are broken. In addition to, many of these families have also been given ultimatums in which if you wish to receive treatment, if you wish to receive any kind of, let's just say, compensation, if you wish to receive financial aid, you may have to put your children for adoption in order to receive that money. That was something else I came up with. So, I don't know how else to explain this other than a lot of this does fall under, like, you can chalk up a handle as personal responsibility, and I'm not going to try and absolve anyone for personal responsibility. That's not my purpose here. I'm trying to say how much the government of Canada themselves accountable in this equation. And if the government of Canada and things like, again, clean drinking water is responsible on behalf of the government of Canada, you promised me Mr. Trudeau, he said you would fix that, we still have 54 different reserves of clean drinking water, then that falls under them. If they're intentionally withdrawing or withholding or suing families in order to withhold money that's owed to them to help the child welfare, that's on the government of Canada. I'm sorry,
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, so this is actually where, listen, I'm not like the girls, okay? I'm like incentives. So this is where I seriously think that the right and left come together, and I say that I'm going to, because this is big. So when you're talking about conservative values, conservative Christian values, I know that makes some people on fire and Christian death and all that stuff. Oftentimes one of the primary things that emphasizes strong families. Strong families come from a strong environment. So if you literally, like, if I was arguing conservatives, I would say, listen, you're born, you're no fault of your own, your parents are addicted to drugs, you don't have access to good water, good education, anything, and then basically you bootstrap. Now, can you bootstrap? Sure. Everybody, you know, some people are fucking right? They become neurosurgeons, like thinking that like grain was stored in the fucking pyramids and shit like that, right? Some people bootstrap, but some people can't. And on top of that, shaking conditions basically decreases your ability to bootstrap. So for me, what I would say is there's variables that we control, there's variables that we can't, and we have control of areas that we can't. But what I would want, because basically what maybe genocide for me is too strong a term, maybe that grants some immediacy to the issue that allows it to be addressed politically. So at the same time, like, I see this shit not as a single generational project, I see this as like a century-long project, literally. And by that I mean making schools that aren't dog shit, you know, early education, and then basically raising productive adults. Now, my definition of productive is probably way different than anybody else, but at the same time, like, that's where I think there's a real opportunity here. The reason why I think I came to this conversation pretty strong, I was like, fuck yeah, I want to do this conversation, is because when I hear that we have like fucked up systems, not enough water, not enough food, not good education, I don't think genocide. Now, whether or not we move past that shit and just focus on solutions and polish our assholes, I don't know. Like, polish our assholes on Twitch, I'm fun, I love it. But at the same time, like, I don't know, strong families, strong children, strong families.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Quick, yeah, but I do want to say we are speeding towards the end. We have about 5 minutes up until our conversation is listed to end. So I just want to ask the room if you want to end here. If you don't have to go for maybe another 10 minutes max.
Yeah, I need to wrap up soon too.
Okay, so if I just add 2 things, I guess I
we do it in closing, or do you think we can that be difficult? Or?
Sure. Well,
I'll give it 5 minutes.
Okay, right.
You don't have Lauren. Lauren, you were thinking first, so Lauren then first. Okay.
Yeah, I first want to mention, I do not think a lack of clean drinking water leads to parents having sex with their kids, and that is a larger problem that we're going to have to address. And that can't be addressed just, okay, give people money, fix the infrastructure down, right? Yeah, we all agree that fixing the infrastructure is good, but this also brings up a whole giant open can of worms of there are people in the indigenous community in Canada who don't even want to be a part of the laws of Canada, who feel that's an aspect of cultural genocide, who feel that the government having any sort of decisions on their land is a part of cultural genocide. So then to balance this issue with, okay, you also need to build the infrastructure here, you also need to ensure the condition of our land, but also we don't want to be a part of Canada, that creates a really difficult contention and problem.
And they don't want to pay taxes either.
When we're dealing with here, and of course we're not going to have time for this debate here, but I do think that is something that should be considered.
So I just want to quickly say a couple points. If you have more interest in this, because I think you have interest in this topic, I would recommend also checking out the inquiry into the murder industry.
He's so passive aggressive.
I'm saying indigenous women, which speaks also to the eugenics program that was instilled in Canada, and forced sterilization that's still occurring to
Eugenics and forced sterilization is the same thing as the inability or the unwillingness to investigate indigenous women's murders. Nice.
Today, as recently as 2018, nearly 100 women, I believe, in Saskatchewan, or no, 100 women in the last decade, but I think 18 women in Saskatchewan have been lawsuits against the provincial government's healthcare program for experiencing forced sterilization. There has been numerous cases across the country of this occurring, and specifically occurring much higher rates to indigenous women, typically under the guise of them not being mentally sound or mentally fit, and often under duress, and that they cannot receive their own children after being born unless they sign away the rights to be forcibly sterilized. So that's one of the aspects of it that will be present obviously in the indigenous women document. There's a number of other reasons though, and I'm just I didn't have time to get into it now, but the conditions that are set up in these reserves that are being perpetuated, the fact that the government of Canada did not even want to give money in return to these reserves because they were dramatic until the class action lawsuit was taken up by Blackstock, which ended up rewarding close to like $2 million, which the government of Canada is still fighting in court to try and recall that they're having. This is like there's so many things that just stack up upon each other. It's the reason why it's not just myself. You know, this is again something that's recognized by international human rights panel. And again, the last thing I'll say on this, especially regarding the forced sterilization of women, the International Congress in the 1982 Rights Commission held in Montreal stated in March 1999 that Canada is a violation of international law and the treatment of Aboriginal people, and that the condition is most pressing human rights is tantamount to genocide. So.
Okay, so
again, that was like 25 years ago, but okay.
Go in closing statements and shoutouts. Please do shout yourself out in your closing statements. Thank you all for attending tonight's conversation. I appreciate your well-being. Sorry for all my viewers on my side of the stream crashing. You know things happen, probably maybe CIA, you know how it works. Everything's going over time.
Yeah, my name is Connor. I run YouTube channel Counterpoints. I'm a citizen rights, law veteran, Marine Corps veteran, science fiction, religion, philosophy nerd. I do like debates like this. Sorry to deal with a dick, but sorry for me a little bit. And then basically, I'm not really expecting what happened. Maybe we detail that a little bit. But that's because, like, I don't know, I give a shit. We're talking about people who ultimately, we're not genocide. We're talking about people who were raped and murdered. We're talking about kids who ran away from their homes and died of exposure. All this shit's fucked up. So we can talk about the reason why I want to enforce strict reality is because that's the force is some way this stuff is portrayed. I would be probably acting not in the most rational way possible. The reason why I want to strict reality past, the reason why I want to strict reality present, is because I think accurate strict reality can get you better prescriptive solutions. So maybe we can talk about another time. I really appreciate y'all, and I wish you all well.
Okay, I'm going to go over to one something.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, first of all, Dylan. I know it's a bit controversial. So, firstly, to assert that there is a genocide occurring, to assert that there were mass graves found, out of all the graves that were allegedly found in the last few months, not a single body has been exhumed. Not one. And even so, this doesn't mean they're not necessarily graves or graveyard. But all the chiefs in these communities have stated these are not mass graves. They do exist, and they do know about them. The 751 graves found, the Cowicess band chief Cadmus Delorme emphasized that the findings were not from a mass grave, but unmarked graves. The band leader in Kelowna said it was not a mass grave for the 215 graves found there, or potentially. The GPR researchers that did this research said nothing is confirmed until things are dug up. Yet progressive activists and media continue to make the claim of mass graves, and so do our debate opponents, exaggerating what were some potentially absolutely horrific things that happened in the past. And we need to be honest about what has occurred to have a proper conversation while not exaggerating. And unfortunately, this exaggeration has led to legitimate hate crimes and destruction today, and that is unfortunate, and especially unfortunate that people are making excuses for it.
Okay, now I'm going to go over to Tale of Two Rabbits.
Thank you very much. I don't know, I'm unclear. Academics, historians, indigenous nations, government agencies, they've been open about this genocide for decades. The Truth and Reconciliation Report was issued 6 years ago. The concession was made that these fires aren't somehow all a conspiracy of Antifa. The concession was made that mass graves are being identified and required.
I can't believe that anybody, even Lance's audience, can't think that this guy had a good performance. There's no fucking way, right?
Further research, the conceit was made that the foster care system is absolutely toxic, and therefore the removal policy was unacceptable, and in response I got rhetorical tactics and a fair amount of shouting, because this was fun. Fully mature people learn from their mistakes and move forward. Fully mature people own up to their past. Fully mature people acknowledge that sometimes a priest can accidentally set fire to his own church, rather than scream at the person who says that it happened. When members of my community learned that I'd agreed to participate in this, they were appalled. I hope that they now at least kind of partially understand why I did.
Okay. Before we go over to Lance to wrap up,
my
I
God.
just want to let everybody know that tomorrow we have the HPTV roundtable on my show for this Friday, and next week I had to reschedule due to today's difficulties my review of Rick Nasheed's new movie, Buck Breaking, with Your Movie Sucks, which should be happening hopefully some point next week. Now I'm going to go over to Lance to wrap it up.
Yeah, I don't think there could be any restorative justice as long as the people responsible aren't taking claims for the actions they've done. If I could use a simile, it's kind of like you, Lauren Southern, because ultimately, if you spent your career rising to become one of the darling children of the alt-right, pounding around with people like Brittany Pettibone, Richard Spencer, touring around the globe with someone like, let's say, Stefan Molyneux, who was well known for measuring the skulls of black and white people, spreading the Great Replacement conspiracy, spreading the Great Genocide conspiracy theory, then going on tour spreading both of those conspiracy theories, in addition to going to join that far-right nationalist group, First Europa, and then joining them by shooting flares at immigrants, and doing all of this, while at the same time, all of it bubbles over and boils over to
I think I doesn't even get the facts wrong. Like, there was some genuinely dumb shit that she was involved in, horrific shit. Shooting flares at immigrants?
point where, at the end of the day, you ultimately led to one of the people contributing towards the Christchurch shooting, who declared that the Great Replacement theory was one of the reasons why they committed the atrocity that they did. Afterwards, you then took everything back.
You fucking pussy. Bringing this all up at the end so I don't have a chance to respond.
You can respond. I'm more than glad. More than glad. More than glad. I would love. Please.
Why would you invite additional conversation? We already fucked this one up so hard.
Wait. You can respond, but let me be clear. I am not going to be part of it. If you want to make this do a fucking shit show, I'm leaving, and I will not contribute to that because that's not the type of brand I want to produce. Do you both understand that? Okay, Lance finished, and then I'm out. You two can fucking eat each other alive if you want.
Sounds good.
Lance, okay, Lance, you gonna finish?
Yeah.
It sounds like this is the most research that he's done for this entire debate.
I'll finish. And then turning the whole thing around to suddenly say that you're going to rebrand yourself as this wonderful new centrist and everything's wonderful and that you write children's books now and it's all ooh-woo and everything's good now and nothing bad ever happened. I think if you wanted to achieve restorative justice when it came all of this stuff, then what you had to do was simply acknowledge any of the bad things you've done in the past, but you haven't. So I don't think the idea of you now doing this rebranding tour is anything more than you just seen the writing on the wall. That's ultimately what this all is. You knew what was happening to your peers, and you were smart enough and astute enough to walk away from it.
You're such a bitch, Lance.
Okay,
Bring it up. Let's go. Stop doing it. I'm staying right here. I'm not going anywhere.
Throw 7,000 accusations at me and then ask me to respond to them. That's great. Connor and I are going to have a chat with my chat. And if you want to not be a bitch boy and have a full conversation another time, we can do that. We'll arrange that.
Okay, you all have a pleasant afternoon.
I'm right here, Lauren. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to go talk to Connor.
I have to go join my family and my life, but seriously, let's set this up for another time. Let's set this up for another time.
Oh my God, let me moderate that debate, please.
I'm 100% for it. All right, see you later, bitch boy.
Have fun. Oh, hey, everybody. It's me. It's Lance. It's your neighbor, Lance. Oh, that'd be wonderful. Well, I'll give you the facts. I'll stick to facts and feelings, not talk about it. Yeah, see, I don't have an opportunity, so that's what I'm saying. Hey, 2 subs. Appreciate you. It's good to see you. How do you know things that I've done?
How's it going?
Everyone's so weird.
This actually might be one of the worst performances I've ever seen from Lance in my entire life, and that's saying something, because he has said some astoundingly stupid shit to me. I like how you were like begging them in the middle to please talk more because you realized that they were getting so absolutely fucking shit stomped. That,
So
like,
one of the preconditions of me doing this, because it was either going to be me or modern day debates, apparently, I was like, well, if we're going to have this, might as well be strictly moderated. So we had a person in the background timekeeping. So like every once in a while I get like an update of like how much each person talked, and at one point I looked and Lauren Southern talked for double the amount of time, both like Lance and
Lance on the rabbit dipshit fuckhead?
Well, okay, I will say the Avatar person from the Avatar. Okay. And I was like, well, if she alone has spoke double, and that's not even including Connor, then I need to do the best lead.
yeah, but the issue was that it wasn't because they didn't have enough space to talk, it was because they didn't have anything to say. That rabbit guy shut the fuck up the entire conversation. Is he an indigenous person?
I believe so.
Oof, he's gonna get arrested tonight. Yeah, Jesus, what a horrible fucking showing.
I believe he's they're getting pretty real.
Yeah, they deserve it hard. They super deserve it. Like,
I don't think they deserve everything.
Absolutely, they deserve it. This is probably one of the worst showings in these times. If you're going to take on, first of all, actually, I will push back so fucking hard against you, okay? If I'm gonna get called an irresponsible platform every fucking time I have any fucking conversation with any of these people, if you're gonna market yourself as the fucking indigenous man's mascot and giggle and talk about how you play video games and do all this fucking indigenous culture, and you talk for 10 fucking minutes, even after being begged by the host, and even after being tagged in by your debate partner 30 fucking times, and you don't have shit to say except, I didn't follow any of the fucking conversation. Nah, fuck you. You deserve everything coming your way in terms of like online fucking like ridicule. Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, well, He was just saying I've seen a few things that are a little over the line about like game ending stuff, right? It's like, okay, that's stuff anybody deserves.
Like the guy literally denied the fire. He's like, oh, well, wasn't it just incense? Like, come on.
Okay, but can I just get you to say that you don't believe he should end his own life then? I mean, just to be clear, he's getting a lot of...
I didn't say he should end his own life. Jesus.
Okay, then let's be clear.
Yeah, there's a TOS over here. I wouldn't say that.
Okay, wonderful. But, I mean, if you want my honest opinion, right? My honest opinion, I'm not... Probably shouldn't. Like, yeah, they didn't perform great.
It's not that they didn't perform great. They didn't know anything about what they were going to talk about. How not? They didn't know anything about the first grave site found. They didn't know anything about the ground-penetrating scanner technology. They didn't know what the depth... I'm sorry, Dylan. You're a history guy. I'm not, okay? You know what the fuck a mass grave is, right? You know that a mass grave doesn't just mean a lot of bodies in an area, right? Like...
As I'm usually referred to when I think of mass graves, it's usually an unmarked site of some sort where a bunch of bodies were dumped into a pit.
Yeah,
quickly
exactly.
After a war crime.
Yep, oftentimes to not disclose what's happening. Yeah, you can't just say a lot of people were buried here. That's a mass grave. When that rabbit dipshit poked up, he's like, well, mass just means a lot. Oh, come the fuck on. Is every single cemetery a mass grave, my dude?
Well, I think the thing is, the mass grave discussion felt very pointless because somebody could have easily been like, why should a school have a grave, period? The fact that there were so many people dying at these schools shows terrible mistrust. I felt like if that angle was like written with, it would have just played much better.
Well, the reason because they were ran by churches, so they had like cemeteries outside. Like that's why, right? It was all like grounds of like church, school, like and then cemetery.
But graves specifically with a large amount of child bodies due to like children like running away
well,
from abuse.
Sure, but I mean like I'm not gonna like defend what happened to these schools because obviously there were atrocities. But I mean like also let's think like past the initial atrocity, you have a bunch of kids dying of tuberculosis. Are you gonna ship those bodies back to like indigenous communities? Like is tuberculosis something that can be spread past death like malaria or whatever? Is that like a concern?
No, but that would be the problem. Isn't the existence of the grave period? The problem is that the grave was necessary because of the treatment, how these people were treated.
Sure, and I can agree with that. But I'm just saying that when you say not malaria, I'm sorry, Ebola, when you say mass grave, you know what you're doing. Not you in particular, but like when you say mass grave, the connotation is you are killing large swaths of people and probably trying to hide that fact. And you're killing so many of them, you don't give a fuck who they are. You just toss them all in a pit. So like cemetery where children are born because a lot of them are dying due to like really bad housing conditions and shit. Like that's bad, but it's not a mass grave.
Couldn't somebody make the argument that due to the large amount of neglect that was shown towards these children, that the intent of like using the word mass grave, and I would admit the mass grave might not be the best word to use here. I would say that the intent of using that word would be to display the amount of neglect and like harm like directed towards these children.
Yeah, this is the problem. This is the problem they always have with leftists. Then stop lying about fact one. When you got fact 2, 3, and 4, they're really bad. There was a lot of really horrible conditions set up in these schools. Tons more children per capita were dying in these schools from tuberculosis and shit. That's what the argument should be about. Don't try to make it about some intentional genocide, intentional mass grave. Like why would you go there? Because when you lose on that ground descriptively, like rhetorically, you already look like you've made up everything else you're gonna talk about. Like, just start on the strong point. Like, yo, lots of kids died here. It was horrible.
I will say the thing that baffled me the most. There's a few things that baffled me, but one big thing that baffled me was like they talking about the church burnings.
Oh my god, the incense.
The incense thing that really confused me because it just felt like a waste of.
It wasn't a waste. He was trying to make it sound like there were no church burnings going on, but it was just a few accidents and they've always been going on. Basically, it was like his version of Holocaust denial. Like that dude was 2 YouTubers away from being a fucking Nazi, guaranteed, 100%.
Well, I wouldn't agree with the terminology used exactly. I do agree that the point of it was to basically downplay what was going on and say like, hey, we don't know what's really going on. I think the line that the source framed later was a lot better, which was basically like, we don't know exactly who did it. It could have been this, it could have been that, it could have been this, which I think was better than just like being like, well, how do we?
Yeah, a little. But I remember when I was first arguing this with Lance, fucking like I think this was maybe even back in June. I don't know. They don't look. But like, I remember that my initial argument was like, bro, the reason why I don't like this idea of it being an ongoing genocide is because when you say that, the response should be people rising up and fighting the government. Like there's an ongoing genocide. That is a demand for action if you live in a just society. So like when churches are burning down, when you say like genocide, like yeah, I mean like that's kind of understandable. So for people to act like, oh, we don't know why churches are burning down when you're using these like ultra charged words, right? Genocide is arguably, besides what, Holocaust, genocide is like the worst word you can use, like most aggressive word you can use. And say that one is actively ongoing, like Jesus.
I would say the thing that got me about this debate was the amount of topics that needed to be covered. Number one, it was the churches. Then it was also whether or not it classified as genocide historically. Then then it later went into whether it's still genocide. Then there was a topic about retributive justice, which meant for everybody involved at any point someone could be like, and I didn't set up the debate. I wouldn't have set it up specifically like that. I would have made it like about one specific topic. This was given to me about 2 days ago. So what happened? Like if somebody was talking about say like the ground radar technology, at some point someone would be like, well, let's talk about retributive justice. Then you talk about retributive justice. And somebody goes, let's talk about what is genocide. And so you pivot the whole conversation. And so it feels like if I was trying to timestamp this, it's gonna look like a fucking mess, and that's not good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the difficulty is that when you talk about retributive justice, you're talking about retribution for a wrong act. We kind of have to agree on what the wrong act was in order to get into the justice part, right? Yeah, so like it makes sense that conversation is gonna precede anything about like retributive justice.
Yeah. The thing is, when the questions were sent to me, and this is something like, for example, I know you've been on Primes before. I don't really like how like for example, Prime like phrases questions when you're in Discord groups, which is like a very long, like almost paragraph for each question. Like considering the fact that this happened at this, is when it should just be, is welfare good or bad?
Sure.
Like, it should just be that simple.
The problem wasn't with you in this debate. Like your topics.
I know the problem for me with the topics was there's so many strung together. And basically
your topics were absolutely fine. Your issue was that half of your panel could not engage on a single fucking topic. That was the problem. The problem is that every time Lauren or Connor brought something up, Lance would dance around 15 things because he didn't know how to address any of the points they brought up. And that rabbit dude was sitting there, I guess, supposedly masturbating the entire fucking time. Maybe to the artwork on one of the games he bragged about playing. He should have spent more time reading the text and less time jerking off the pixels.
Well, the problem is, I don't even think you disagree with me because early on, for example, there was a conversation about retributive justice, and then it got to something else. And then somebody else like thought I thought this was about retributive justice. Then it went back to retributive justice. Like okay, then talk about retributive justice. And so that it was able to shift around that way. And I don't like giving people too many opportunities to generally pivot by having multiple topics being able to be talked about at the same time. If we're going to do multiple topics, then I feel like there should have been 4 separate sections of the debate. We talk about each topic and build upon it. Like at first you would talk about, okay, is it a genocide? Then you build upon that saying, okay, now let's talk about retributive justice, because once you come to a kind of conclusion of that, you've built like on your premise.
Yeah, of course. But again, the problem is like what are mass graves? We couldn't even get agreement on that. I still don't think that Lance or the other guy knows what the fuck mass grave is. So you don't have an agreement on that. What else has the retributive justice been about? Oh, so when Lauren asked like, okay, so should we just like blanket release like the names of all the like Catholic priests or whatever that work at these schools? It seemed like Lance thought the answer to that was supposed to be yes. I'm not sure what his feeling on that was. That's not really retributive justice. What else was it? Like they couldn't agree or engage on any single point. Like in terms of like the graves or whatever. Like a lot of chiefs have come and said like, yo, these were our cemeteries. Like we just they're unmarked. We're gonna try to get this shit back. But like they couldn't engage on any point.
You wanna know what rule I'm gonna have going forward? I've had this rule before, but again, I didn't know a ton about like everybody, like the one person involved.
Oh yeah, Lance asking Lauren, can you prove abuse didn't happen at this school? How the fuck are you even supposed to engage with a question like that?
Sorry. Going forward, I'm never gonna have somebody ever on my show again that doesn't have like a webcam. I'm just never gonna do it.
Yeah.
Even if I'm offered something like the thing for me, there's a few reasons why, and this is not even like something specifically directed at this person as like an individual.
Yeah, rabbit fucker.
Shows, right? Number one, I don't like being so public personally, where everybody knows my name. It's literally my brand, and the person I'm talking to or the people on my show don't have to, and so the consequences for them fucking up or the consequences for like me screwing it is not the same.
Oh, I literally just gave this take right as the debate started. I don't know if you were listening to me. I literally said exactly. I was like, I don't know how I feel about no webcam debates because anything I say, I'm held accountable to for the rest of my life. I get doxxed, FBI hit, like all this shit or whatever. Like it feels a little shitty sometimes when I got like an anon dude with no camera.
Definitely feels like every other show, like I'll have somebody be like, well, Dylan, this is really good for your career, and just knowing that people like actually like do that. Or like the other day, people were like going through my LinkedIn profile, being like, "Look at this fucking Fed, he works for this political PAC." I'm like, "Oh, god damn."
Oh,
and like, and then looking back at them, like, there's literally fucking nobody's anons on the internet. That fucking sucks. Like, I just don't like that. And also, it's just not good like for the people watching. Like, you want to be able to see someone talk, and as a moderator, all you have to do, like, you see all this like visual stimulation. You gotta look at Lauren, you gotta look at Connor, you gotta look at Stars, and then you see like a profile. You don't know when they're talking or not. And a lot of these people who don't have webcams usually also have to put a lot of effort into their mics, and so it's really hard to hear when they're talking. And so then they get to talk like in this instance, like 10 minutes out of the whole show.
No.
But it's not only that for this instance.
No, his mic quality was fine. That had nothing to do with that. He didn't say anything because he didn't have anything to say. Because the space between his ears is emptier than Northern Alberta. He is brainless fuck.
His mic quality was also not great. It was very. I just turned him on. Wait, no. I had to turn him almost to max. Maybe on the surface he had a different thing. It was different. But on mine, I had to like turn him to Discord, like volume to all the way.
Sure, you might have had to turn him up, but he still had nothing to say. He was a dumb fuck. The mic quality here was.
I agree with the fact that he didn't say much. In fact, I can send you the numbers on it. One second.
I was on Twitter, yeah.
Yeah. So he talked about 10 minutes out of the whole 2-hour show.
Yep. Did you? I'm curious. Did you have 1v1 set up between Lauren and the serfs and she canceled and asked for a 2v2? Did that ever happen?
I never set that up. No.
Okay, just curious.
But to be clear, this was given to me 2 days ago. Lance told me that he was trying to do that, so maybe he did that with somebody else. And then I was told that basically what happened is he wanted to have one. Then she like changed demands or something for like a moderator and all this other stuff to 2v2s. So I have no clue. This fell on my lap 2 days ago.
Gotcha. Okay.
The Wolfpack's coming for you.
CTV.
Yeah, Wolfpack's coming for you, man. Did you see his recent arc?
Yeah, I saw him. Yeah.
About the Confederacy.
Oh, I didn't see that. I just saw him wearing a suit or whatever.
No, it's a suit, but recently I fucking tweeted out like something like Robert Lee was not that good of a general, fuck off.
Oh yeah.
And he's on a Robert Lee was one of the best generals ever, like arc. And it's I don't know, man. I gotta say, there's a lot of people you can face in the future. CTV, somebody can strip that belt from you, man.
Yeah, maybe.
Look up Wolfpack, I'll mull you.
You should when you see people having debate. This is just a personal rule of mine. Like when I'm arguing with people, unless I know the person we're friendly, I will never use like a philosophy term. Like I'm never gonna say like fallacious appeal to authority, or I'm never gonna like I won't because
To be bluntly honest,
yeah.
Every single time I hear that shit, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're saying. These are the big words that confuse me.
Sure, and it's usually just like honestly, like, just explain what they're doing wrong. You don't have to use like the debate term or whatever. Like we don't need to know that you're saying like the image you're posted, the fallacies and everything. When they kept saying like when Lance kept going over and over again, it's just a semantic debate. When the semantics of the words they were arguing about was literally material to the entire conversation. Like what is a mass grave? Like oh man, this is honestly god. Like I fully admit maybe I could be biased. I have a huge hate boner for the Sir TV because I think he literally has the intelligence of like a 10-year-old. Like my god, like I'm trying hard to give him some kind of edge because like I know that I hate him and I know everybody knows I hate him. So I'm trying to find like points where I can give him a little bit. But god damn, can you name a single part of this conversation you thought that you felt like he prepared for?
That I thought he'd be prepared for? I think his opening statement was prepared. Give me a second, okay?
His closing statement. I feel like his closing statement was when he did the most research.
So I do think towards the end when he was listing out statistics of like this percentage of people today were sexually abused, this percentage of this, he had links. He linked them all. I can send you all the links.
Sure, percentages of abuses or whatever. Like where's the thing that says
actually I could say that like he posted I think like 6 or 7 links and I think only one other person posted a link I think once and that was Lauren.
Yeah, but it seemed like he had like a couple facts and figures like memorized, but he didn't really have like any good arguments to build off of them. Like he kept trying to set up the straw man that Connor and Lauren were saying like, oh, nothing bad happened, and that was like what the argument was running with a lot. Like, oh, nothing bad happened, oh, nothing bad happened, but like neither of them were making that argument.
Yeah. The thing is, though, Lauren would like say things during the debate that made it like was just a fucking terrible optically. Like at one point, she said like this was unfortunate, and I was fucking sitting there like, why the fuck would you use that word? It was I don't know.
I think you were watching my. Were you watching?
I started watching halfway through.
Oh yeah, because that was my first big criticism when she said unfortunate it was down. Later on though, in that same statement, she used the adjective horrific, but she almost fucked up really hard with that answer. Yeah. What a horrible fucking conversation though. Jesus Christ.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, what's up?
Do you think there's any way this could have been improved through moderation? Like, is anything I could have changed to do it better?
In terms of for moderation, no. I mean, like if half the people aren't like even capable of engaging with the topic, then I mean, what are you gonna do? What are you supposed to do? Right.
Well,
when that rabbit guy opened up his opening statement, he